How's it going, everyone? We've got a guest with us today. Our guest is Elliot Crow. How are you this evening?
Just Crow is fine. I'm fine.
Crow. All right. So, how long have you been practicing for?
Practicing what? For this interview? All
No, practicing with esoteric philosophy and I guess magic, I would say.
well, I'm an old chunk of coal, and so I'm 38 now.
Okay.
But I started to engage occult material when I was a teenager. When I was I was probably, I don't know, 16, 17, 18 when I was in elementary school in Baton Rouge. And no, I'm just kidding.
I was
But
gonna
no,
sound like doing the math.
it often shakes out that way here. The no, I was in high school and I started getting into shit. So
And what did that look like? Was that just like whatever you could find at the local library, or did you actually have like specific spells and rituals that you would do?
yeah, so I was raised Catholic. My family's been Catholic for a very long time. My Catholic family escaped to Louisiana because they were being killed in England because they were people of note in the English court
Okay.
at the time, and so yeah, I was raised Catholic, and I went to Catholic school, and then I got away from Catholic school. Catholic school in Baton Rouge, at least where I went to school, was very, I want to say blue collar, and that's not to shit on blue collar people, but it's to say that it was pointedly more Protestant
Hmm.
uh, than than maybe the Pope would like, at least in tone. And what was weird was I don't know. I found it unsettling. And though I've made my reconciliations with the Catholic Church, and what happened afterwards was in like a little atheistic adventure. I had people don't believe me when I say this, but I had teachers in high school in Baton Rouge that were like encouraging me to read Karl Marx
Interesting.
in school, and I did. And I remember I read all of Das Kapital when I was like 14, and it was an interesting read, but I'm like, it's silly. Maybe it was just like my dad talking to me in my head.
Hmm.
But the effect of that was I became interested in like continental philosophy, and then there were some good souls on the Yahoo groups in the 90s or circa 2000 that were like hey, if you're interested in Marx, you should read Nietzsche, right? Opposite of Marx, and who's replying to a similar like philosophical trajectory. And um and I read Nietzsche, and the tone of Nietzsche, because atheism is being like atheistic but nature affirming, and the tone of Nietzsche, and I'm like, this guy's not an atheistic philosopher at all. He sounds like a religious figure.
I think
and
so too. Yeah.
and so one night, my mom tells me and my buddy Luke, she's like, bring my shitty treadmill. Mom wasn't using it, to her brother, my uncle, and who was like a goth DJ in Baton Rouge at the time. And
Nice.
he used to play keyboard for Clint Zymox, if you've heard of them.
I haven't.
No, they're fun. It's cool, goth, industrial, electronic music, whatever. And he played for them for like half a year or something. He managed goth bands, which is a big deal in Baton Rouge. And so she's like, bring my treadmill to my brother. And so my buddy Luke had a truck and picked me up. And my buddy Luke also had a lot of weed. And so we got really, we drove to the house, and Luke was like, where'd that speed bump come from? Like, falling apart in the back of his truck. And he's like, and we get there, and Luke's like, I'm not going inside. You go inside and talk to me. All right. And so I go inside, and my uncle's like cutie goth girlfriend's inside. I'm like 15, 16. And my uncle's and I walk in, I'm like, we're here with a trip. And and his girlfriend's, she's like, you poor thing, what happened to you? Did you get really high? I'm like, no. And so like I drag, and I'm like, Luke, help me get the treadmill out of the back of the truck. He's like, I can't. And so I drag in the treadmill, and my uncle's like, it's almost like it's like a chick track or something. My uncle's like, thanks for bringing the treadmill. Now that you've been doing funny stuff, do you want some books, right? And he gives me the Satanic Bible by Anton Zander LaVey, not his real name, and he gives me The Occult History by Colin Wilson.
Okay.
And he gives me some other book on like fucking secret societies in America or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And but the and I read LaVey's book and I'm like, this is fucking shit. This guy's an idiot. Like he announces himself as a charlatan throughout the entire introduction. And
Sure.
it's like, it wasn't until later that I discovered that people like buy into it literally. And then and it's like being a paid member of the Church of Satan. You might as well subscribe to somebody's fucking OnlyFans and pretend like you're gonna and then but The Occult History by Colin Wilson. Have you ever read this?
I haven't. I haven't.
Curiously, I've seen it referenced recently, and I think it was just like a mass proliferated book. And so like there's like YouTubers that have come across it and they're, ooh, this looks enticing. And it's like it's a thick book. There's like 5 or 6 parts to it, and like there's a whole part on lycanthropy, and so it gets pretty nitty gritty on some stuff. And there's a whole part on Crowley, and and the but frankly, like I found his take on everything occult very kind of like verbose and cynical,
Mm-hmm.
very loquacious, and it's like in China they say the more somebody has to talk, the more likely it is they're bullshitting. They say that in Chinese, they're like, this guy's bullshitting. No, what's the Chinese expression? It's I don't remember. And it's like a Day Swan Feijin, Su Swan Feijin, that which must be proliferated must not be true, right?
Okay.
And which is bullshit in its own way, but but I'm like, God damn, this guy Colin Wilson is so full of these fucking $10 words and has such a cynical attitude. And I'm like, and I read his thing on Aleister Crowley, and I'm like, wow, he really hates Aleister Crowley. Like, he hates Aleister Crowley, and I hate him. So I'm going to buy every book that he referenced.
Uh-huh.
And back then, when the OTO was the big Crowley fraternity was on point, you could actually find Aleister Crowley books in a bookstore. And so I made my broke ass over to the fucking Barnes and Nobles and bought a bunch of Crowley books. And am glad to say that I was taken with Aleister Crowley at a very early age, generally, and also in my career in magic, because I still find his authority very compelling.
So let me interject for a second. My apologies. What was the first book that you started with? Was it like the Book of the Law? Was it Magic Without Tears? Braa?
I think I actually read the Book of the Law first.
Okay.
And I remember being indignant, because the Book of the Law concludes with a comment that issues the most dire warning against discussing the contents of the book.
Center, what is it? A center of pestilence or something like that?
Center of pestilence.
And
which I was also accused of being in 2020 when I didn't wear a mask.
Of course.
But but at the same time, Crowley and other places, he's like, you guys got to meet and you got to discuss the law of Flema and whatever, and you got to promulgate and explain things. I don't know, mixed signals. But I read the Book of the Law. It's very Nietzschean, and I'm familiar with that, and so it was resonant. And then I read, wait, what were your guesses? The Book of the Law, Liber Abba.
And Magic Without Tears.
Magic Without Tears. In my next book, I read The Diary of a Drug Fiend.
Okay, that's
And
probably that's a good second one to read, I imagine.
maybe you're in high school, yeah, in Baton Rouge, especially at the time. Yeah. And the and I like Diary of a Drug Fiend, and the fantastical idea of Crowley understanding how Thelema might exist culturally in practice. But whatever, it made sense in the Book of Law for me. And then the third book that I read was Confessions, which is his extremely abridged autobiography. He called it his autohagiography as a joke,
Hmm.
where hagiography, hagios, is a saint, right? A holy man. And so, but a saint can only be a saint, at least as far as the Catholic Church is concerned, if they're dead, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so the idea of a autohagiography is ridiculous, but that's Crowley being funny. And so he called it the hag, right? He's like, I gotta get back to the hag today. But apparently what's published is a very abridged version edited by, I think, John Simmons and a couple other guys. And OTO has been promising next year for 20 years now that they're going to release the full book, and it's going to be 7 times the size.
Wow.
And it's like that's not a book at this point. There's got to be another term for it, like a tome or something. And, a fucking a door block or something, but a weapon. But yeah, that was the hag, and I read it, and it's so funny because Crowley was so funny that I don't know, like maybe this is like a Louisiana attitude, like for politics, if you're not funny, you're not getting elected. If if uh if like for personality, if you're not funny, then you're not worth fucking being around. Like Louisianians like to joke a lot. But I was reflecting on my terseness with some of my Zoomer friends who get prickly with me because I pick on them too much, and I'm like, I'm a millennial. We rip people all the time, so I don't know. Maybe it's a generational thing. Maybe it's a Louisiana thing. But yeah, it's like Crowley's humor was compelling, but also just being able to see, it's an autobiography, and so it's essentially a reduction of his experience that he's recorded in his diaries, as was required of him by himself, and in the like kind of with humor and self-deprecation, there's a lot of honesty.
Yeah.
His honesty and like how he understood things and how he kind of hedged his bets and so on really spoke to him as a man that's just trying to figure it out, but who at the same time is confronted with these like powerful experiences that felt like a great cross to bear, so to speak.
So let me ask you this. Well, first, I guess we should address the OTO. For those who aren't familiar with the OTO, could you explain a little bit about what that is?
You want me to explain to the folks at home?
Yes.
The OTO was founded by Aleister Crowley, which is factually not true, but that's not important. What's important is that as a couple Austrians founded a German and Austrian, and they're like, oh, it's like Freemasonry and some weird sex Freemasonry, except that we're specifically interested in the elixir of life, and we got a little intel on that from the East. And by the way, if anybody ever tells you they have intel from the Near East, disregard, right? And so Crowley's story is that like he wrote something that was De Profundis, and he I think it was a Star Sapphire, and he got emergency tweet. He was added by Theodore Weiss, who said like you can't write this. It's a secret. It's such a secret of our mysteries. And Crowley's like, well, you better swear me your highest mysteries, and then he was one of the top dogs in this order of like 6 people or something, which was a very normal thing in Freemasonry at the time. And from there, Crowley went about hijacking the OTO and rewriting all of its initiations, and which were almost nothing, and restructuring it and so on. So I mean, like, these guys left some fucking some pencil notes for Aleister Crowley, but really, when you like, it's like, if the guy's 99% responsible for what the organization became within the first like 10% of its history, then he is the founder of the fraternity. And so, like, it's described as being like quasi Masonic.
Yeah.
And
and OTO stands for Ordo Templi Orientis, correct?
yeah. So Order of the Temple of the East,
Mhm.
and East is not China, Japan. The East,
Right.
when you live in Austria, Österreich, the Eastern realm, the East is fucking Hungary, you know. But the Eastern frontier, it's like, anything east of Vienna, but it was really a reference to the Tolkien's East, which is the Levant, and the realm of the theater of the Crusades,
Sure.
which the Masons were, I guess, interested in. I'm not a Mason. I never caught into that, and didn't want to hew to their laws, but not that I have any beef with it, but like, OTO in a way turns Masonry on its head very deliberately in almost every initiation, and also very elegantly. And Crowley, and it's funny because, like, Crowley originally, like, for Crowley, OTO's purpose is this mystery of the ninth degree, the elixir of life, and also the sex magic, and this soulism, this like understanding of how the soul relates to the body and relates to the realm. Um, that's what's most important. And so, what's most important about OTO in its inception was the highest stuff, and then they kind of shook that down to the middle stuff. Though they never wrote initiations for the middle grades, called the Lovers Triad, 3 triads: the Man of Earth, the Lovers, and the Hermit. And you started the Man of Earth, the middle management, the Lovers Triad, and then the Hermit Triad, where, like, you get it. You're in the know. Specifically, the Sanctuary of the Gnosis, and you got the secret, whatever, or you're working it and developing its technology actively. And so, for the OTO, as Crowley got it, it was kind of a top down. Like, there's this interesting thing, and but we've got to onboard people into this system. And so he originally worked the Blue Lodge grades of Freemasonry, which is where you start with, like, your knees on the ground, swearing you believe in God, on the Bible, and you end with a couple of your buddies beating the crap out of you in the lodge, saying, "Give us the word, give us the
Sure.
word." You know, what's your fucking password?
Yeah.
Ever getting into my computer, fuckers? And they kill his ass, and the word dies with him. And but for Crowley, and so, I guess at some point the Masons sent Crowley a cease and desist, and they're like, you can't use our grades. That's copyrighted, or so, I don't know.
Yeah.
And well, of course, it wouldn't have been any sort of a legal threat, because that's ridiculous. So it must have been a fraternal threat. So the idea that Crowley complied meant that he still respected Masonry enough to go with, whatever orders were coming from above.
Mhm.
And he did. And he wrote a little essay on Freemasonry, where he describes their initiations as being Suswan, Fate, Jin, right? The verbose, and full of redundant things and unnecessary things. And he's like, I could streamline it and make it better. And so when they're like, stop working the Blue Lodge, Crowley's like, fine, I'll write my own introductory series of initiations called the Man of Earth series. And he did. And a funny thing is that, like, a lot of people will take the Man of Earth initiations and think, like, oh, well, these are Crowley's introductory initiations. But Crowley only wrote so many initiations in his life in any detail. And so, like, of them, like, the Man of Earth series of initiations that he wrote, that's like 75% of the initiations that Aleister Crowley wrote in his life. He wrote a couple for the AA, and he wrote, and really he left like some chunky notes for the Lovers Triad and a lot of little notes for the Hermit Triad, and that was it. And so, like, as far as I'm concerned, the Man of Earth series of initiations are Aleister Crowley's. That's Aleister Crowley's initiatory series.
Right.
And he initially wrote them to be like a sort of boot camp for prep work for the work of AA. And so, where in OTO you begin at birth and end in death, in AA you begin in death, and you end in a rebirth as a babe of the abyss. And so OTO is getting you to death, and then AA is starting you from death. And though later in his life, Crowley was like, "Oh no, they really should be like the OTO should be more concerned with social issues, and therefore the Man of Earth series should be more like didactic, like Masonry is, and teaching people how to be like a good guy, but in the context of this new eon." But he never rewrote the initiations. So they are as they stand, and they're good for that. And they're great initiations. And yeah, so that's OTO. And today it's like, honestly, it doesn't live up to its name, and it's run by hypochondriacs that are not only not publishing any Aleister Crowley, but it looks like they're fucking with people that try to. And even though a lot of it's in the public domain, like they're putting the kibosh on people. Indiana, the word kibosh, right? There and it's like, isn't the central mission of the OTO to promulgate the writings of Aleister Crowley and the Law of Thelema? It ain't there. No.
So if you had to choose
wine, so I don't come off as too heavy.
No worries. No worries. If you had to choose one work of Crowley just off the top of your head that you would say is either your favorite or is the most, like, I don't know if quintessential is a word, but I'm going to use it, the most quintessential of Crowley's, just off the top of your head, what would that be?
You could say quintessential.
Quintessential, thank you.
My favorite Crowley book boils down to 5 different books.
Okay.
No, not really. I know what the word favorite means. It's like, I think Liber Abba is the best book.
Okay.
And, you order it in the mail, and then it arrives at your front door, or if your Amazon driver likes you and you live in a bad neighborhood, your back door. And it hits like a fucking, you pick it up, it's like, God damn, it's
yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, this chemistry 1. It's like, God damn, there's a lot of weight to it. You ever watch the old Kids in the Hall sketch comedy show? It's a good Canadian sketch comedy, and there's a funny thing where a preacher says he's got 2 books in his hands. He's like, what weighs more, the Bible or the Bhagavad Gita? And it's like, actually, Liber Abba weighs a lot more than both.
Sure.
And especially if you're using good paper, which in my printings they did. It's definitely the best ever. It's OTO's like claim to be a publishing entity is Liber Abba. Okay. And the legend goes that the head of the OTO today, who's also the editor of it, went through like 2 marriages in 10 years, like working his ass off to edit the book properly. And it's like, yeah, and the book doubled in size with the addenda and the appendicitis and the and the footnotes and so on. And it's like okay, but it's actually all really good and really relevant because it connects everything so well, and it connects his other writings so well. And so it's like, I think if you were given just that book alone, cover to cover, you're prepared to execute the great work as understood by Aleister Crowley.
Interesting.
But if there's any other favorite book I had, it would be maybe Magic Without Tears,
Mhm.
because that's like Crowley late life, and he's responding to letters written from this lady that was a student of his in AA,
Mhm.
and she's just fucking giving him fucking hell by asking him these like very very uh like a Sunday column style questions,
Yeah.
or do angels cut themselves shaving? And he's like, hold on.
That's funny.
But he's so good at segueing from, I guess, there's no such thing as stupid questions, just stupid people, right? He's so good at segueing from these questions through humor into like heavier metaphysical stuff,
Mhm.
uh, that shows like really what he thought about bigger questions at the end of his life. Like as an example, she asked him about like one of the best chapters is like the chapter it's called, and we don't have her letters. OTO is going to publish them next year. Or at least
Interesting.
it's been hearing for 20 fucking years, right? Next year, we're going to come out with the fucking full version of Magic Without Tears. And Crowley's title was much better. It was Alistair Explains Everything, right? Uh, and they're like, no, Magic Without Tears. And it's like, what if I cry? Well, I'm reading, you're wrong.
Yeah.
Um, and and what is it? So we don't have her letters, so who the fuck knows what she asked? But the chapter title is the need to define God, self, etc. And it's some of the heaviest Crowley, because he says he asks the question of like, you're talking about self, you're talking about self awareness, you're talking about your higher self. What the hell are you talking about here? And you're talking about God and so on. It's like and and actually really obscure. I took a goofy class in college that where like once a week for an hour a week, where you listen to these different people talk about whatever the fuck they think they're smart about. And this one guy, he was talking about like it was kind of like a philosophy of science thing, and he was saying um, the terms are only valuable to the sciences in as much as it lends to the further inquiry. And so when it comes to proposing religious explanations for why things happen or so on, it's not that that's wrong. It's just that it kind of stops the discussion. It stops the yeah. And so what's it called? Popper called it falsifiability. And and um, and that's kind of Crowley's statement concerning like self and God. But he even goes so far as to say like he's a happy extrovert, and there's no such thing as the self or introversion or anything.
Mm.
And that's where like people ask me like, how does Thelema really distinguish itself from other contemporary movements, or even its historical antecedents? And I would say that's like the big thing. It to the point of where like Thelema is almost, it's obviously, if you've read the Book of the Law, it's aggressively antagonistic to something, and
Sure.
it and it doesn't say exactly what, but there's a whole lot in the Book of the Law that is like statements that are corrective in tone. As an example, um, love is the law, comma, love under will, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
It's accepting a premise that's already been
Sure.
uh, asserted or accepted by obviously the entirety of humanity, more or less, because that is like Enlightenment positivism and liberalism. Uh, love is most important, right? And and but the love under will is explaining the nature of that love and the conditions of it. And so there's other corrective things like my friends who be hermits, you shall not seek them in forests or in mountains, but in magnificent beds of purple crust by beds of purple crust by magnificent beasts of women with fire and light in their eyes and masses of flaming hair about them. There shall you find them. You shall see them that rule a victorious army at all the joy. And I think that that's a response to Taoism and
Mm.
other ascetic cults that whose mystics are recluses. Get the fuck away from society because society's insane, and so that you can be at peace with your oneness or whatever. But if you're one, you're not, right? If you're out in the, if a mystic achieves enlightenment in the woods, does it make a sound? No. uh, and so there's a really incredible lesson there that is anti interiority and anti mysticism, and is very Nietzschean in the sense that your interiority exists in this domain of reason where you're constantly trying to retroactively justify the things that you've done, and you become chained to your haphazard moral justifications for your life, right?
Mm.
And for Nietzsche, those justifications are a product of words in your head, and language is consciousness, and consciousness is slave morality. And so really, your conscience and your morality is just it's some sort of like aggregate of the shit that you hear in the world more often than other things, right? And so what a fucking path that is, right? And you'll see this among mystics where you'll meet, I mean, like some of the most like self-involved people I've ever met have been fucking yoga teachers, and I like yoga. I don't fault them for I suppose they're sincere in trying to teach people this mystical wisdom or something that they value so much. But it's very easy to fall into the fucking trap that you forgot you set for yourself. And it's like fucking, it's like heroin, it's like the libertarian would say, let people do whatever drugs they want to do, and if they fucking suffer the consequences of their addiction, such as the complete destruction of their life and maybe the family cohesion, then fuck them, right? But a good shepherd would say like, no, maybe we cannot include heroin here. And my point is that there's a seductiveness to reason, because there's a seductiveness to fitting in, right? And in that, but not everybody should fit in. I think most people should fit in. Like they should be concerned about being like a productive member of society in kind of maybe a boring way. But but the but there's got to be like for whom this like in the example of Lao Tzu with the Tao Te Ching, he was writing to a specific audience. He was writing to like wise men that
Or
are
the initiated, so to speak, right?
yeah, the Shengren, which literally means holy men and or God men. And he's saying, because like the Tao Te Ching, Tao Te in Chinese today means ethics. So it's the classic of ethics.
Hmm.
And so what does ethics deal with? It deals with the like how to keep things basically sustainable and fair and good natured. And always, even up to Hegel or Nietzsche, it's about these groups that exist essentially in a very different ways than other people. And for Lao Tzu, it's the aristocrats, the ruling class, God bless them, and whatever mystics or something, right? Taoists, Shengren, and then me, the people, broadly, right? The people in like in like a Marxist sense, like the proletariat, right? Mean in Chinese means like the proletariat. 国民党, 共产党, yeah, 国民党. Never mind, I got it wrong. 国民党 means country people party, and that's the Kuomintang, the Chinese Republicans. Chiang Kai-shek, and so on. And then there's the Gongchandan, which means the public goods party. And that was the Maoists, the communists, right? Whatever. So ethics is about like being able to, because you can't just say like everybody just needs to get the fuck to work and everything's going to be fine, because we're not the Borg, or at least like we still have a Borg queen, or some Borg queens, and we got a Borg queen, we got Data, and Kirk, or not Kirk, Picard was a Borg queen in his own way. You know, there's people that are connected to the system and are in a position to change it, and those for Nietzsche are the artists, or the, what's he call them, poets, mystics. He doesn't say mystics, but he calls them the poets, because I think they have a way of, like, they can fuck with words in a way that changes how consciousness works between people. Yeah, I forgot my point concerning Crowley, but
I was
that,
we
but
were
that's the,
discussing what the most quintessential working of his was.
yeah. Oh yeah, so the need to define God's self and so on. It's interesting stuff. And there's an extra version to it where, like, the Book of the Law speaks like the Tao Te Ching. It's
Yeah.
addressing a specific audience, and it's also speaking broadly. And to each man and woman that thou meetest, where, do you see her?
I
Hell
didn't
yeah.
see anything. I just saw a pink flash run across the screen.
When I was in China, I learned that women should bow very low, and that's why I've also done foot binding on her. No, I'm just playing. Uh, but that's what she's doing. She's like creeping past the camera. It makes me look bad. The but yeah, so the Tao Te Ching of the Book of the Law speak to a specific caste. In the Book of the Law, what is it? And to each man and woman that thou meetest were but to dine or to drink at them. I'm looking at the camera so nobody thinks I'm reading off something. It is the law to give, right? Then they shall chance to abide in this bliss, or no, it is no odds to this quickly, right? And so, and Crowley says, like, you know, he doesn't say proselytize or preach, he says promulgate, which is a legal term, which means to make the public aware of a new law.
Mm-hmm.
A Christian would say a new covenant, right? And so for Crowley, you promulgate the new law, you make the, you know, give people, because the law not promulgated cannot be expected to be obeyed. And so you make the public aware of this new law, and they shall chance to abide in this bliss or no. And so, like, some people may have the capacity to appreciate the esoteric dynamics of the law of Thelema, and some people may not. Or it may be that their way of appreciating it is appropriate to their will. And so some people say, like, you know, oh, well, do the worship of the whole blah. I reject that. I think that it's my will is tied into the will of Christ or something. And then and they abide by a philosophy or a religion of servility. Well, if that's their appreciation of it, then maybe that's true for them. Nietzsche called this incomprehensibility in the gay science, and it was this idea that a philosopher desires to be understood as much as he desires to be misunderstood, but the way that he desires to be misunderstood is somehow recursive or reciprocal with the way that he desires to be understood. It's a very interesting idea. I think Leo Strauss is the only person to really elaborate on this in an intelligent way. But I think the Book of the Law echoes that fatalism, and but also, like the Tao Te Ching, it's speaking to people in different ways. But really, its audience is people that would, you know, pick up the fucking Olympic torch and go about the great work in the manner of the Shungren, in the manner of a holy man. And unlike for, I don't know, it's hard to say if Lao Tzu thought that there was, to use like traditionalist terms, where you've got whomever, and then you've got whomever and the Brahmin and the military caste, the Arya or the Aryan caste. It's ableist terms. The warrior and the priest and the people. it's tough to say where Lao Tzu really put the relationship between the warrior and the priest, but it's a dispute in traditionalism as to whom should be held in the highest regard, the warrior caste or the priestly caste. And they both have their own cudgels to advertise
Sure.
their worthwhileness for being at the top of the pyramid. But I think in the Book of the Law, it's very much the warrior caste that's being advocated for, um, and I think rightly so.
That's an interesting concept because it seems like a very priestly working. So it's interesting that that might be the case.
Well, the
Robert Anton Wilson discusses in I believe it's Prometheus Rising. It's either Cosmic Trigger. I believe it's Prometheus Rising. He talks about the dissemination of information and how monopolies are controlled first through the priests controlling the information, and then like the warriors. What it's like priest, king, warrior, thief is how I think about it. It's like the priests get the information, then the kings get the territories, and then there's the armies, and then there's like essentially the currency comes under next. So that might be a different way to look at it, but yeah, it's just an interesting concept that a book on religion would be advocating warriors over priests. There's a sort of dichotomy there that I enjoy.
well, it's Nietzschean in that it's might is right, or at least it will be regarded as such over a certain period of, after a little time, right? And that's the way that nature works. And as somebody that identifies as a human being, when I'm at work, I think that there's like as a regular old person who lives in the world, there is a lot of stuff that we consider to be unnatural, right? And
Sure.
that and it fucks up nature, at least in terms of like natural selection and procreate. Like people don't have babies anymore, and I do. I got a lot. Um, but people don't have babies anymore, and it's like, is it because this person is not viable, or is it because they've become like psychologically burdened with the doomsayers of the modern age and dire predictions about the future of humanity or condescension towards the need of humanity or anything like that. And
There could be
it's
more to it than those two things, but those are certainly the main two, probably.
but the idea is that like successful people reproduce, and in their success, they're in their reproduction, they're they're establishing an adaptiveness going forward. And like some of the smartest whatever people I know are some of those ponderous people I know, I'll put it that way, are they're childless or something. And I don't know about you. I'm certainly not trying to pick on you, but
No,
it's a cultural phenomenon today to
sure.
like be childless, even if you're a smarty pants. And it's like, God damn, if you think you're smart and have a grasp of things, you should be having children. Like you're contributing to the psychological viability of humanity. If
Hmm.
you're right, if you're right with your assessment of things and your ability to cope with the dimness that surrounds everybody today, because we all have very good reasons to have dark tidings for the future. But it's like, yeah, we're also like people, and like, shouldn't you like sound like Corbin McCarthy? Shouldn't you like carry the fire? Uh, and Yeah, so my point being, Nietzsche's idea of might is right, and how and the essential selectiveness of nature. It's you wonder sometimes, because there's people that aren't doing too hot, that have a lot of kids, and um but then there's people, and so like, is natural selection really taking place, or are we like psychologically fucked into these like you couldn't even call them secondary. They would be like secondary asexual characteristics, or we're finding people that share our gloom and don't, want to participate in life anymore, and so on. So I think that's where, for the Book of the Law, bringing it back, for the Book of the Law and its tone, it's a reactionary book. And people ask me like, oh, are you on the left or are you on the right? Are you conservative or whatever? Because I side with conservatives on a lot of things, but also I don't have umbrage with leftists on a lot of policy ideas or whatever. And I tell people I'm a thelemic reactionary, in step with the Book of the Law, which is apocalyptic in tone, and is obviously responding to things being very, very wrong, right? I mean, like the first verses of the Heraha, Horus speaking in the Hawk-headed Lord of Silence and of Strength, in chapter 3, the final chapter of the Book of the Law. I am a god of war and of vengeance. I will deal harshly with them. And it's like, well, vengeance means revenge, and revenge for what? And it's like there was some great wrong that was done. And for most people in the OTO today, the revenge is against the fucking Christians or whatever. But I don't feel that way. I think that Christianity today is a parody of itself, even from 100 years ago. But really, like, the predominant religion today is like Enlightenment rationalism, and that is what I think that the Book of the Law is responding to. Is this like insularity and this meekness and this, you feel
Perhaps
like
materialism to a degree as well.
Sure. And because you're not allowed to be anything, and other than like what you consumerism, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's like everybody's just fucking turned into fucking Woody Allen, where where they're just like stressing about whether or not something's the thing to do. And I'm not going to do a Woody Allen impression, that never lands well. But the I can do a good one, but I'm not going to. And but it's like the timidity. And there's another holy book from Crowley called Liber Zati, and it just renounces all these attitudes: the weak, the timid, the poor, the tearful. These are mine enemies, and I am come to destroy them. And speaking from the voice of the Lord of Initiation, with green wings, he lights upon the black earth, or no, he lights upon the black earth and glads into greeting is coming. And so, theoretically, it's the same speaker in chapter 3 of the Book of the Law, and it's and so it's authoritative as far as Thelema goes, and yeah, it's just this renunciation of this not pity. I mean, I was raised Catholic. I pity people. I see people living in like squalid conditions and poverty, and they don't know what's happening in my life. Like, why is everything fucking shit? Why can't I get a leg up or anything? And there's a natural human pity. If you didn't feel pity or fear, I would say that you're not a Thelemite, because you're not a human being. You're not engaging reality. You're not dealing with real human things, sadness even. Like, these are normal. If you don't feel these things, like, you don't need Thelema, you need a fucking a straitjacket, right? But yeah. So there's bad things, but it's the pitifulness. That's what I was going to say. It's not pity, but it's the pitifulness of humanity that really has to be railed against, and that's the call to action in the Book of the Law. And that's it's it wasn't Crowley's message initially, because he's talking about all this mystical shit that he's getting from the Golden Dawn and from yoga and from the Ordo Templi Orientis. And they're like, have you heard mein Freund, have you heard of chakras? and they are gateways of power in your body, and through them you can be able to tap into these the subtle body and the blah blah blah. But it's like with the OTO, like I said earlier, he wanted to change the onboarding into OTO to something that is more. Oh, she's not talking this time. There she goes. We have a little baby who doesn't like to sleep. She likes to not sleep. And what was I saying? Yeah, Crowley wanted to change the onboarding into the OTO and to be something that is more ethically concerned. Well, what does that say? He was less interested in getting people, lost in the weeds of mysticism and frankly, interiority and narcissism. And he was more concerned with inspiring people. There's simply almost sounds like Jordan Peterson. Like, these are things that you can do that will make you more effective and competent as a person. And
I never
frankly,
thought I would hear Crowley compared to Peterson. That's interesting.
I don't know. Oh, I don't know if it's a popular thing among Thelemites. Most Thelemites are left wing, which I think is silly. But because it's wrapped up in this like liberal ponderousness and interiority, because it's all about you, right? How can I emphasize how absolutely radical and important I am? But that's not important. You are very important, but your importance is in relation to your will. And in the absence of the discovery and the doing of your will, you're not important at all. You're errant. You're just doing shit. And in the absence of this vocation, this directive from whatever, a host of angels that are doing their best to shepherd the course of mankind in a way that makes them more to speak of Nietzsche, ennobled. Nietzsche talked about ennoblement, which is a viticulturalist term for it's not you're not cultivating the plant into what you want the plant to look like. Like you could have grapevine, but your concern is not the plant. Your concern is the grape. And
it could also be compared perhaps to like the conductor in the symphony or the orchestra rather. One is only as important as the other. There's a relevance there or a relativity there.
Well, for Nietzsche, the difference between the cultivator who's just trying to design how a plant looks through selective characteristics regarding the plant, its appearance and viability, the person who's concerned, the viticulturalist who's concerned about its ennoblement, is concerned about not the plant, not even really the grape, but of course both of them to a certain degree. But really, it's the product, it's the wine of the grape that
Yes.
they specifically concerned about. And so it's not the system, it's not its products, but it's their capacity to inspire others and bring a little levity and maybe a little perspective. I don't know what wine does. I keep trying. But that's I think this calling, and so in the apps, and so when I talk about this with my people a lot recently, which is like people bring up like this, they'll say that like Thelema is redundant, and they'll say like Crowley was a syncretist and he had all these different things and he didn't really present any new ideas. He was cherry picking from world traditions or something. Like he's fucking Inya or Dead Can Dance, and who were great, but I've listened to Dead Can Dance forever. But for Crowley, I don't even think he would claim that. Like I'm racking my brains, but I can't remember him saying that, I'm doing something completely different and new. I mean, he contextualizes Thelema constantly. He wrote, people are like, he didn't even fucking talk about Rabelais and the Abbey of Thelema. He wrote a fucking essay on it's called The Antecedents of Thelema. I'm pretty sure that's right. And he talks about Rabelais and all the other people that used the word Thelema prior to him. It's just people don't know about it because he didn't publish it, because he didn't finish it. But it's where it cascades into notes. It's a brilliant essay. But my point is that for Crowley, he, at no point did he say that he was operating in a vacuum. And but that he was in a sense, which is that he to tell somebody that they need to um, undergo these obscure practices, specifically um, medieval Renaissance conjuration techniques to communicate with a spirit, but not just any spirit. We're not trying to talk about when he's talking when he's fucks in the Bible or whatever. Specifically, we're trying to talk to your angel, which is something that many traditions Crowley emphasized, have harped on, did harp on for a long time in the ancient world, but don't anymore. Not in the West, really. It's hard to think of a extant tradition today that was alive 500 years ago that did emphasize this.
Perhaps I always thought in the Bhagavad Gita when Arjuna addresses Krishna that
Mm.
that is almost a like a Socratic daemon or holy guardian angel sort of current or entity.
But I would compare that to Christianity, at least Renaissance Christianity, and say that as Christ was the stand-in for them, for their angel, so to
yeah, I could agree with that.
But in there's always our daimons, demons, our angels, right? For the Greek demons or whatever, and and um, and so you've got yours, right? But there's also this idea of like a lord of daimons.
Sure,
right?
sure.
And is he the king of kings, the lord of hosts? Co-equal with the other two fellows in the Trinity, and therefore might as well himself be the creator of every fucking thing. Or is he like your polis, like your people's spirit or something like that, like Odin or something? And so and Crowley seemed to be fond of that idea in some obscure places, but yeah. So when Crowley brings up this idea of communion with your angel to discover your will, an idea that was forbidden in the Christian Roman Empire.
Of course.
Apparently Socrates. Well, Paul says you cannot sup at the table of the Lord, and also at the table of demons. But the word he uses is daimonos, and so it's almost a very specific ban from Paul that you can't be Christian and also do this thing that was very, very common in the ancient world, of your personal angel. It's all pretty specific. And then Constantine apparently read that, and he forbade the birthday. You didn't have a birthday under Constantine.
I actually did not know that.
Yeah, because it was punishable by death. The penalty was death, and it was because, I'm guessing, but other people that have told me this sounded more sure than I'm willing to be, that the manner of Socrates for worshiping the genius, which is an equivalent idea or person, was to burn honey cakes. Right? Birthday cake, you got fire on it, right? Was to burn honey cakes on your birthday as an offering to your genius. And I found some Egypto stuff that talks about them burning honey cakes as well. But so maybe it was like a Mediterranean practice. But anyway, verboten for the Christian Romans. And so my point is, like, is Crowley saying like I'm here now for something completely different, Polema? Or was he saying like this injunction of do what thou wilt should be the whole of the law is as a very necessary thing to promulgate, because people have completely lost sight of who they are and what they're supposed to do. For a blacksmith's son in the 16th century in Bohemia, there was no doubt what your will was.
Sure.
Most likely, right? It was to strike the iron while it's hot, like your father And in the but nowadays it's like, you know, what are you supposed to do? That and you know, for Crowley, like the will would presumably be of consequence to the world and other people, even if it just means like you're the best fucking plumber in Baton Rouge or whatever. You know, you might think like, I'm not a plumber, by the way, but I envy their skills and their salary. And it just sucks to break a pipe open. You know, you're on the first floor and you're working under the subfloor, and you're like, it's got a leak, and you break it open, and like fucking shit falls in your face. You know,
Yeah.
not fun. I don't know if you tried that recreationally
No,
or,
not in this life.
but 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 presumably, like what you're supposed to do in the world wouldn't be inconsequential.
Sure.
And I would say that like of the 2/3 of Americans today that actually work, right? Have, like they get a check from a person in a regular, semi-regular basis, right? They have a job. Of the 2/3 of Americans that work, I would venture that probably 2/3 of them work jobs that if they were blipped in an instant, the universe wouldn't notice that much. Um, like whatever, white collar jobs, middle management jobs, the people that I think it's like it's 30% of the economy is accounting or something adjacent to it.
Wow.
I get that would probably include Wall Street because they're accounting speculators.
Hmm.
And probably a third of jobs are service industry jobs. Not the shit on a lady that needs to make a buck, and so she wants to be a waitress or whatever. But it's like it's just a lot of redundantness in the economy. And but what about like people that make things? And that was like, you know, in the few examples that Crowley gave, like in his novels, he gave examples of like manufacturers and inventors and soldiers concerning people that like discovered their will. Crowley's will conveniently was to promulgate the law of Thelema, and conveniently, a lot of Tell Knights nowadays think that that's basically their will also. And so, well, that's good. But he writes that like it's necessarily a part of your will to promulgate the law of Thelema, because I don't know, maybe it's demanded by the book of law, but for Crowley, he was like, because the idea is that if everybody gave a shit about this, then things would be more swingy in the world generally, because there wouldn't be a bunch of people doing redundant or worse, counterproductive things for everybody else.
Sure.
And that's probably half of the U.S. economy is cock blocking, getting in the way of other people. They're trying to like make a buck being productive or something like that, or float their family or something. But yeah, so anyway, that's my point. Is that like Flame is not redundant, but it's almost like traditionalists. And I try to make this argument, and people sometimes shit on it because they consider Flame to be counterposed to traditionalism, the vein of René Guénon and Julius Evola. But it's almost a traditionalist argument that Crowley almost wanted people to take a step back and say, what is your purpose here, and figure that out and do it. And it's not a redundant question because you don't fucking know, because we all live in the fog of the war of the new eon. And the only thing that's changed is the conditions of the battlefield, because our new world is very fucking strange, and like people are raised by parents that give them no directive. They're and or they're raised. Their parents may pat themselves on the back, but they're raised by a fucking smartphone that every single day encourages, nay, imposes upon them every fucking bad idea of a lifestyle conceivable. And so telling somebody, it's like, look, in the absence of any other good idea, or even with things that you think might be good ideas, you should probably check in with your angel and for a little inspiration from above. And yeah, so I think that's where Thelema is. Not salient, not nouvelle, but crucial, because the vast majority of people aren't really doing anything.
And even taking Crowley out of the equation of Thelema for a moment, I mean, it seems like a lot of people, especially in today's society, could benefit just from the concept of being more willful and being more intentional about their life.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like some Sam Hyde level advice, like picking something and sticking to it is probably better than just like fucking floundering between all these fucking ideas that you've been convinced are good or something like that. Crowley
So,
compares somewhere to like binding yourself to the mast,
huh?
and you can think of like Ulysses.
Yeah.
That's his name, right?
I was gonna say Odysseus or Ulysses. I can't remember which one it was, but yeah, the wax in the ears and bound to the mast, certainly.
Yes, exactly. Let's do Odysseus. It's got more syllables. It sounds cooler.
I think it was in the Odyssey is the only reason I thought that perhaps.
Guy's
But
got a sword so cool. It was named after him. And but yeah, exactly. He's like, I don't care. I want to hear the siren song.
Mhm.
All right, homies. This is a real bro moment. He's like, I'm gonna call you every fucking name in the book. But and I'm sorry. And I'll put an apology on Twitter the next day. But strap me to this post and stuff this wax in your ears. We're going to, I'm gonna log on to Instagram for a minute. And it's like, it's like that scene in True Detective where he's like, you don't want to see it, Marty, and he turns it on anyway, and Russ Cole turns it on, and he's looking at the video of his evidence. It's like, oh, we shut it off.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so it's kind of like it's better that you're good at something than not very good. It's oh, well, I'm a jack of all trades and a master of none. It's like, actually, you're not very good at fucking anything. And because the attention span is so dispersed,
Right.
Yeah, and in society structured in a way where like you have like what are two things that the state makes you go to, the laws of the state make you go to for a period of time? Prison and the school, right?
I was gonna say jury duty too.
Yeah, you can get out of jury duty easy. You just say I'm a big fan of Charles Manson, and you draw a little thing on your forehead.
Sure.
You're, just don't use permanent marker. You might have to take off a couple days.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, school, and it's like, and I'm not trying to like America gripe here, but it's relatable and it relates to Thelema in this specific instance today, and it's gonna get worse. And but it's like, your fucking kids, your kids are forced by law to, and you can get out of it if you want to homeschool or something, but good luck making money, family, with you, and you've got your wife to stay at home taking care of the kids. Single mom, good fucking luck making it. Nope. Your kids have to go to school, and they have to learn at school because education is invaluable. And then and so for what? How many years? 12-ish. You
13.
learn.
Most people go to kindergarten.
Well, a lot of people go to kindergarten. Probably the best year you'll have in mandatory, and you learn jack shit. And I like math as much as the next guy. I like finding out what a predicate is for the 50th time as much as the next guy. But give me a break. Like, this is ridiculous. And it doesn't prepare people for life at all. And isn't that like the fundamental thing that young people, though they pronounce it or not, expect of the people that are charged or in a position to take care of them, such as their parents and whatnot? And it's like nobody has any fucking idea what you're supposed to do. And that's the majority of young people. They get no direction from their parents. They get no direction from society. the well-taxed social mechanisms or the well-taxed for social mechanisms that are in place to make sure that no child's left behind. It takes a village to raise a village idiot, and here are the villages. We're going to do our best, and and then you grow up and you're just fucked, and you're like, and it's like, oh, by the way, not only do you have no idea what to do, but the economy is fucking shit because your government is run by you want to think they're just stupid because if they are malicious and go hang out.
I'm gonna get a beer.
Oh, okay, just getting a beer. The she says it helps with milk production.
I didn't know I was invited on the podcast.
Oh, the baby's making noise. The baby's broken. But the a baby crying at first is a nice sound, but when they'll amp it up in a minute if you don't go to them quickly, and then it's like fucking noise metal or something. But that's the question, and that was the question for Crowley. It wasn't like, how can I maximize my individuality? That's bullshit. Who fucking cares about your individuality? You want to be a brain in a jar? You can do that. You can no endorsement here, but you could do something to yourself, and they'll put your brain in a jar and maybe try to study you in the university in a number of years. Finally, why does this guy do this? That's a brain in a jar. You're inconsequential, but not to sound schmaltzy, but we're all connected and we're all obligated to one another. And the atomization that exists in this liberal age of enlightenment and interiority and narcissism is absolutely toxic, and it also toxic to what? To our nature. And our nature, we're not just biological, we're ecological as well. We exist with other people. We define ourselves in relation to other people, and that doesn't just have to be slave morality, because like you look at the great sages and hierophants of the past, and what was their concern? People. It wasn't here's you could fucking how you can eject yourself into mystical outer space as rapidly as possible. Though there were those people, right? You can go be a Chan Buddhist, and I met some. I went to a Taoist monastery once in Western China, and they had these like mud igloos on the side of the monastery, and it's like and I'm like, what are those fucking igloos? I don't remember what I asked. But they're like, no, that's where the monks are meditating, And I'm like, what monks? And they're like, Chan. And Chan means, actually, Chan means I'm really, really hungry. Chan maybe, I don't know. But Zen. And they were Zen monks, and they literally just locked themselves in the fucking, in a hot box. And they're like, yeah, we bring them food every few days. And they eat. And I'm like, how long are they going to be in there for? And they're like, until they want or until they die.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, God bless them. Great service to humanity. Boy, are they enlightened. But, like I said, if a mystic gets enlightened in the woods, does anybody fucking give a shit? And yeah, so it's important for us with Philippa. What's the answer? Figure it the fuck out. Do what thou wilt. Crowley presented a magical mechanism to be able to get this answer. And Crowley's like, it solves all philosophical and religious questions of the modern age. But it does, because all the philosophical questions are like, what is ethical? What is good? What is true? And the religious question is like, how can I be right with my spirit? And for Crowley, the answer was the same: do it the will, or like your mystical trajectory it exists outside of yourself. And so it almost makes one want to fucking throw away all the magic and yoga and most of the magic of Thelema. The lesser banishing ritual, or the lesser ritual of the pentagram, and Liber Resh, and blah blah blah. It's not magic as much as it is just yoga. It's preparatory work for specifically the communion with the angel and the discovery of what it is that you're fucking supposed to do with yourself. So,
yeah, I've certainly likened a lot of the elemental grades practices to a sort of yoga. They certainly have that asana quality, and like the dhyana and dharana, the focus, and
Yeah.
finding union certainly resonates with the elemental grades, especially with me. So how has magic and thelema changed your life for the better?
Oh, geez, I don't know, man. Like, I was in PTO for almost 20 years, and then they kicked
Okay,
me out. So as far as that goes, I wasted a lot of fucking time
perhaps.
hanging out with the OTO. Well, I wasted a lot of money. I reflect on it. I'm trying to do my own thing now, and I wouldn't be doing that if it wasn't for the lessons I got from the OTO, positive and negative. And the but yeah, I mean, I'm not a rich guy or anything. I'm poor, which is cool because it gives me all this free shit from the government, and which really saves up a lot of time that I would otherwise have to work to get stuff that I fucking need. um, but um, but I would say kind of broadly that it's affected my attitude to a great degree,
Mhm.
where I was an angsty teenager, lost, and am now found a person with perspective in the world. That has made me. Well, I think Nietzsche would say that I'm right in as much as I've found I've reconciled myself enough with the darkness of the world to feel like life is good, and because for Nietzsche that was the big question. Um, Socrates said on his deathbed that he owes Crito, I don't know, Crito in the Greek, Credo in Baton Rouge. Uh, uh, I owe him a cock or an ass or something. I don't remember, right? But I think it referred to some gamble where whether or not life was worth living. And so Nietzsche's like, Socrates denied life. And that was Nietzsche attacking Socrates and the Socratics. He preferred the pre-Socratics, people that understood things in these broad elemental trajectory of ideas, senses. And there's an unpublished Nietzsche book that I came across recently. I was writing an essay on chaos, and I came across this. And it's he kind of wrote proto books, like the Gay Sciences proto book for Thus Spake Zarathustra, and this is like a proto book for the birth of tragedy, and he discusses the pre-Socratics, and it's also for the genealogy of morals, and like how you can diagnose their disposition by understanding their by looking at their understanding of the physis or whatever. But anyway, the I would say that I'm in a Nietzschean sense, I've become viable because I found something
Mhm.
affirmed life for me,
Right.
and and it may be not on like keep trucking, but also like give a shit about myself and my world, and also feel like I'm positioned enough in my understanding to like have kids and extend life in that way.
Mhm.
And for Nietzsche, that's what it was. It was an affirmation of life, despite some very serious questions concerning the ultimate or whatever.
Okay. So it gave you a way to sort of apply yourself to society at large, to a vessel to engage with the world around you, you might say.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was a cure for the melancholia of my youth. That
Mm,
was,
okay.
and it was a delicious wine, and uh, and yeah, I didn't know where I'd be without it, which is why I'm grateful that I came across it at
Right.
such a young age, when I was so disillusioned and so on.
Right.
It's not it's not simply because like, you know, it just so happens to be like the intellectual crusade that I find most interesting, but it's also something that that helped me live in the world.
Okay.
Uh,
And you mentioned Nietzsche, you've mentioned LaVey, you've mentioned Crowley, as well as a few others. Are there any other sort of inspirations or influences that you feel really helped propel you on your path?
well, I liked the traditionalism of Julius Evola and Rene Guénon a lot.
Okay.
Are you familiar with this at all?
Gnaw a little bit. I'm not sure who the other person was that you mentioned.
Well, don't look at Wikipedia. It's uncommon. Um, but the I'm glad I found them because, and I found them while I was a very committed Thelemite, and um, and they were interesting because they shared historical experiences with Crowley, and as much as they were contemporaries, they were very interested in the not esotericism or the occult or whatever as a retreat, but rather as as a doctrine that should be applied, if not only to politics, then also to people,
Okay.
all people. And so I came across it, and it was interesting because it spoke out so aggressively against the modern world in a way that Crowley really didn't. Like Crowley kind of waffled, and I think that he was a lot more of a whatever libertine in his youth, which I don't think anybody would dispute when it comes to Crowley. And he became more conservative over his life, but his concerns were always a very traditionalist one, which was the securing of the aristocracy and its position over the everybody else. And Crowley believed in that. It was because he was an Englishman. He had an affection for royalty, maybe. But he in Lieber Tiandao, where he pretends to be a Taoist monk that swam across the fucking Yellow Sea or something. He whatever sea connects China and Japan. And I lived next to it for several years, and don't expect me to know its name. Google Maps, you couldn't access it in China, right? And
Yangtze?
no, the Yangtze is a river in southern China that ends in Shanghai. But anyway, he pretends to be a Taoist monk, and he says the Taoist monk Guoli Ya Crowley. He swam from this shithole way high way. And get this, I was writing an essay on this years ago, and in the middle of the night, I'm finishing my essay because it's going to be published the next day, and I'm like, wait a second, way high way, and which is like one of the many nothing metropolises of China, and I'm like, I'm in Wei Highway right now. I'd gone there for a wedding, and I look around. I didn't see Crowley there, but I'm like, kind of funny. I'm talking about this weird fucking. It was like a Aleister Crowley in China essay, and then I ended it with this thing. I'm literally here in this nothing city, and yeah, it was a nice town. It was fine, good people. I enjoyed the wedding. I got to wear goofy clothes and carry a litter with the groom on it, and but he says, Guolia, he swims across the, I don't know, channel. We'll call it the Japanese channel, just to piss off the Chinese. Fuck up your YouTube algorithm. So he swims across the channel, and Guolia, the Taoist, arrives in Japan, and he says, your aristocracy is not an aristocracy because it is not an aristocracy, which is a pain in the ass way of making any point. But what he means is that the people that are in charge can't be considered aristocrats.
Right.
Aristocrat means aristocracy means a rule of masters, and you're not masters anymore, and that's evident in your lack of wisdom in the execution of your duties. And so Crowley had a fondness for the aristocracy. He had a fondness for the royalty. Like, I would say almost everybody in Europe did.
Yeah.
In a former part of the previous century, up until all of that collapsed completely, and with the Great War and then the big one, and so there's an absence of masters now, and it's the people's rule, democracy, and it's like, God damn, I'm not sure I ever trusted people to do anything right. It's like didn't that king's family, him and his fucking his paternal line, didn't they do pretty fucking great for a long ass time? Where'd they go? Oh, we killed them. We're what's left now. But don't worry, because we're here because the people are reasonable and good natured, and they make a decision and putting us here. It's like,
Which is why they killed their leader.
Right? Yeah. Like, you don't want the other guy. He's dead anyway. It's like, oh, good argument. So yeah, Crowley had a fondness for the aristocracy, and that's a feature of traditionalism. And so I was very fond of traditionalism, and I guess I still am, though I haven't read any of their literature in a very long time. But I understood Crowley to be resonant with it in a way that I think most Thelemites would balk at, because they interpret Crowley as being a liberal, but really they mean libertine, and but they consider traditionalism to be very like stodgy and fixated on the past. But Crowley was fixated on the past. I mean, he's like all these recipes that he prescribes for people for the purpose of the fulfillment of their life.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't pull them out of his ass. He got them from the fucking past. And
Right.
And I took a fun class years ago on Nietzsche, and but to lead up to it, we were talking about Hegel and thesis, antithesis, synthesis, and they were like, it's not 1 plus -1 equals 0. For Hegel, the relationship of thesis and antithesis is more like what's his name, Thomas Kuhn in the Structure of Scientific Revolution. It was that a anomaly is introduced into the equation, and it doesn't negate or abrogate the previous understanding. It makes the previous understanding transform in a way that conform to the new understanding, and that's the synthesis. And so it explains why a lot of Hegelians were very obsessed with the classical age. It's because they saw the classical age in its sense of eternity as being the good thing that has to be reconciled with the reality that it confronts today. And so yeah.
Okay. And so is the assumption of God form something that you still practice to this day, or is that something that you have sort of transitioned through?
I don't know. I think the assumption of God forms is like a peculiar ritual practice, and it's like it's actually a pretty good example of where like magic and yoga intersect very aggressively.
I agree.
Because you want to appeal to something that you don't understand,
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's like actualized through your yoga powers of being able to like achieve concentration in a specific state.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, no, I think it's very important.
And were there any specific entities that you liked to assume other than ones that were prescribed to you, or did you just pretty much stick to the book when it came to that?
I feel like a lot of people look at what I call magico mysticism as a means of being something other than what they are.
Sure.
Um, and even to the point of like magical mottos, everybody's Frauder this or Sor Lilith. It's almost always Lilith, so I'm just gonna say Lilith. It's, you know, people like, to what degree are you hiding from yourself?
Playing a character.
Yeah, it's playing a character. And so like, are you honestly engaging yourself and your will in this assumption of you know, it's like you could say that like fucking astrology and or your natal chart is like your create a character for your fucking life, you know. Like, oh my god, this planet over here, planet over there, it's totally like this neurotic problem that I just can't get rid of or whatever. And it's like, cool, that's who you are forever now. It's, yeah. And like Crowley and his initiations, not to tell tales out of school, but you approach his initiations with your fucking name, right? And so you like, if you want to get initiations in OTO, you can't, you know, you're like, hey, all right, what's your name from the fucking application? I'm Frauder. I'm Frauder on an unintelligibilitus. And no. What's on your driver's license, asshole? What your, you know, who's that comedian? It's like Muhammad Ali. What's your mama calling you? Cassius Clay. I'm gonna call you Cassius Clay, right? That's your fucking name. And you approach the initiations with your fucking name because that's who you are. And not to say that Crowley didn't make people pick fucking mottos or whatever, but where he makes people pick mottos, it's in relation to their understanding of their oaths and obligations. It's not who you fucking like are now, you know. I used to live in New Orleans, and like, goddamn, everybody in New Orleans had a spiffy fake name for themselves, like Tuesday or Otter or Star or whatever. And it's like, did you fucking crowdsource your identity on Reddit? And
Tumblr for the girls.
or a Tumblr? I don't even know what Tumblr is. I'm an old chunk of coal.
Yeah, Tumblr is the girl version of Reddit.
Elliot's is girl version of Reddit. I don't know. A Tumblr, I don't know about girls. But yeah. So when it comes to people's like fixation with, to answer your question, deities or whatever, it's often like, and I'm on all these like neo-pagan subreddits, and I see, and it's like, I'm on one like a Greek mythology subreddit, and nothing there ever goes anywhere unless it's like, which god is your favorite god? And then people have all these ideas, and but what all they're doing is like trying to affirm their ego as far as like what they're, you know, fixated on. And it's like, that's not, I don't know, I think that's a denial of life, because it's a denial of like your own dumb acidness and where you are and shit that you have to fucking deal with. Like, you know, don't pretend you're something else.
Well, and as soon as we begin fragmenting ourselves into archetypes, we're missing the picture. Like, we're the whole wheel, so to speak. And to break off, you know, a spoke of the wheel, you know, the wheel is either weaker or the spoke is no longer, you know, the mechanical instrument that it was a part of.
Yeah, I think most of us are pretty shitty wheels. Missing some spokes.
Friction will round and smooth us out, I suppose.
Well, goddamn, the wheel's been around for like 5,000 years. It's like you have to wonder what the what people had to deal with in the good old days of prehistory. Where you're like, no, I can bend this wood. It's like, you're nuts, man. You can't bend. And he's like, all I need is a 3-foot steel pulley. I'm like, what the fuck is steel? You know?
Right.
But yeah. But Crowley said in Libre, and you know, it's almost a what do you call it, platitude. A man is what he makes himself within the limits fixed by his inherited destiny. He is a part of mankind. his actions affect not only what he calls himself, but also the whole universe. And that's just true, but it's also like a daily affirmation. And it's not a Stuart Smalley. I don't know if you're a fan of old SNL, because and you look at he was like it was, what's the senator's name? It was a senator from SNL, Minnesota.
I don't know. I'm not
Alan,
sure.
we'll call him Alan Greensburg. And he does like he has like a fucking cardigan, like a soft pink cardigan on, and at the end of each, and it's all about how everything's okay, and almost like Mr. Rogers. And at the
Sounds
end of
like Dana Carvey character.
no, it's not Dana
It was
Carvey.
older than that.
There's overlap, but he at the end of each episode of his fake affirmation show, he would look at himself in the mirror and say, "Because I'm good enough, and I'm enough, and gosh darn it, people like me." And so like that's not Libre Libre, but it's like I don't think that like self affirmation in a very small sense like that is toxic necessarily, but you have to have humility. And the Book of the Law speaks much of pride, and I think there's I think pride is the most important virtue and or sin.
Huh.
But you have to have something to be proud of. And so you have to begin with humility if you're going to fucking get anywhere. And I think a lot of yogis and a lot of occultists alike get really high on their own supply very rapidly, whether or not they're schizophrenic, which if you're on occult Reddit is often the case. Not to shit on people, but it's like, it obviously attracts people that are like, just freaking out about how important they are and how essential their message is. And it's just like you've got to not put yourself on the back burner, and not just like be a skeptic, but you have to humble yourself to the idea there were people before you that pursued a similar work that probably there's something to learn from them. And that's what I love about Liber Abba is in the prologue or whatever introduction to Crowley's book 3, part 3 of Liber Abba, which is Magic in Theory and Practice, is this almost like scientific statement of like, we know this is the problem, and there's other people that have dealt with this, and there's curiously, for all these people, their remedy for this problem was strikingly similar. Let's repeat their experiment and see if we get similar results.
Right.
And if so, then there's something to it, and we can then begin to look. We can go down the rabbit hole of where do we go from here, if there's anywhere even to go from there. So,
and that's the method of science, aim of religion aspect that I really respected from. That's probably the thing that I respect the most that Crowley sort of propagated was that phrasing, because I absolutely love that. And I love thinking about magic as a scientific art or an artistic science. I think that's a really important approach to take.
Yeah. From our little conversation on Reddit, I didn't get the impression that you were not that we talked about it much at all or any, that you were specifically familiar with Crowley.
I in my delve into this world, I tried to give every school of thought its due time, and I found a lot of Crowley's theories and writings very intriguing. I wouldn't necessarily call myself a Thelemite from like the major definition of that, but I mean, I have gems from the Equinox, I have the Book of the Law, I have Abba, I have several of his works. The Book of Thoth is probably one of my favorites. I would say I'm semi-familiar with his work, but I couldn't sit here and go toe to toe with someone who was in OTO for 20 years. That's for sure.
Well, I wasn't. I was kicked out when I was 19 years old.
Oh, okay. I misunderstood you. I
No,
misunderstood.
it's fine. Yeah. So I'm a rube, all things considered. But yeah, what I like, I brought this for earlier reading Confessions was that like it was Crowley's like humanity and jokiness and honesty that I found compelling, and 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 that's there's nothing else but the sentiment of the method of science, the aim of religion reflects that. Like you don't begin at truth. I've been told you end at truth, but you have to begin at honesty, and you can there's a lot of honest dumbasses, but if you're honest with yourself, then you can move beyond being just a dumbass. And
I think so. Yeah.
And so that's what I like about it is that. And I was talking to a friend of mine via email that was an OTO friend that I hadn't spoken to in some years, and we're talking, and he was making the criticism that like when it comes to the elixir of life, Crowley didn't know exactly what it was. He like left some good notes and a lot of ideas, and maybe that meant that he actually knew what it was, but you have to figure it out, which the OTO system considers to be the case. Like the 8th degree is here's all the materials. You can take the 9th degree once you figure out what it means.
Mm-hmm.
Much as there are 9th degrees, then theoretically people figured out what it means, which is to imply that it means something, right? Mm-hmm. Specifically, and then everything beyond that, the 10th degree or whatever fucking shit, the big man in the OTO calls himself 11th, 12th, 13th degree, whatever. All of that is just administrative, according to Crowley. So there's the 8th degree. Here's the materials. There's 9th degree. You figured you got it, buddy. But you look at Crowley's notes and you look at his letters, and it seems like he was still kind of trying to work it out himself. And that's true for a lot of things. And so like there's all this occult stuff surrounding Thelema that is not spurious, not superfluous, but errant maybe, or extra, and like chakras. Curler's like the A is built on the Sephiron, the OTO is built on the chakras. Okay, interesting. And so I'm taking all these OTO grades, and I'm going to get a lot of elaboration on the chakras. Supposed to think about them and how they might. But the best stuff from Crowley is the Crowley stuff that he alludes to and suggests very softly, but doesn't say outright. And so, like, what I would say to my buddy is like, you look at fucking read Sir John Woodruff's Serpent Power, and
I've got that on my bookshelf. Yeah.
No, it's incredible. Mm-hmm. But I tell you, I read that when I was 2nd degree in the OTO, and I'm like, this book is aggressively appealed to when it comes to the initiations, and it's a curiosity for Thelemites because Crowley never references him, even though they may have overlapped, because Crowley did a little Buddhist stuff in Ceylon, and so it's like, did Crowley like flirt with chakras and then fucking ignore it or whatever, or did he just like leave it to you to figure out how he meant it? And that's another thing, unfortunately, about the initiations is that they were the introduction to Thelema, because Crowley didn't expect, I think, people today to be so reserved when it came to initiation. Like Crowley's idea, like in his revised introductory series of initiations for OTO, they're all kind of contra Freemasonry. And so obviously Crowley expected to be initiating a fuckload of Freemasons,
right,
to kind of teach them different lessons, and which aren't. Freemasonry is bullshit, and therefore you need to do the opposite of what Freemasonry says. Crowley plays on some of the deepest aspects of Freemasonry with his initiations, but yeah, but his flirtations with all these different systems is not whimsy. It's he expected you to really get what he was talking about through experience.
mm-hmm.
And so, like you asked me earlier, how did I get into Thelema? People ask me all the time, what are the intro books for Thelema? And the intro books for Thelema are being initiated into OTO, specifically because AA doesn't like. I mean, there's a reading list for a student in AA, just because a lot of people are applying for AA and didn't fucking know anything at all. And Crowley's like, all right, we need some buffer here so that people at least know what they're getting themselves into. They're not just like, sitting in their submission for membership into the Theosophical Society and AA and everything else they read in Popular Mechanics. That's a Woody Allen joke.
There you go.
That's a Woody Allen joke. Do you remember that, Elliot?
No.
Woody Allen's he bedded a pretty New York girl, and she's like, have you heard of the Rosicrucians? And Woody Allen says, like, I'm not going to join any cult that's advertised in Popular Mechanics. Fuck, I did my Woody Allen impression. No.
There you go.
but yeah, so there's a reading list for AA, but people nowadays, they say like OTO isn't a teaching order. AA, that's for AA. AA teaches you shit.
Well, that's interesting.
But the opposite is true.
Yeah.
Right? AA is a testing order. The idea is that your superior went through the shit that you went through in your grade, and they're in a position to test that you got it in some essential way, to where you've satisfied that grade and are ready to move up and start building in a different area. In the case of the outer college, simply for the purpose of the preparation of the communication with the knowledge, conversation with the Holy Guardian angel. The OTO, and look at the OTO founding documents, like, you're going to establish universities. You're taking fucking orphans from hot single moms, and you're going to help these fucking poor kids, who are just as good and smart as anybody else. And don't laugh at my Biden joke. Yeah. Don't laugh at my Biden joke. And you're going to bring them in. You're going to provide them education. You're going to teach the world about the esoteric sciences. And you're going to publish blah blah blah. Fucking OTO is obviously the teaching order. It's just the current administration of OTO doesn't care to teach, and they're like, no, it's not us. It's those other guys that we don't quite like that much, but we kind of pretend to sometimes. And yeah.
No, the OTO, they don't teach, but they'll have seminars.
Plenty of seminars, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Seminars on things that have nothing to do with Thelema.
Yeah. They had the NotoCon fucking 1500 recently, I don't know. And it was in Colorado. They were going to do it a couple of years ago, but they decided not to because the flu was going around. And I've had the flu before. I also had living in the Gulf South. I've also eaten at suspicious buffets before, and frankly, I don't want to. But yeah. So they had this new Noticon, and the entire first day of Noticon were there. They call them mods.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime you've got a fucking weird ass acronym, raise an eyebrow. They're sneaking something in, right? It's like the longer the acronym, like the CIA is only a 3-letter agency, FBI, DHS, and that's only 3 letters. But when you've got an acronym that's like 7 or 8 letters long, you are fucked, right?
There's a lot of translation that can occur within that acronym.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of you better know what this means, you know, and if not, we're ready to talk at you for a fucking hour or more. Get it, you know? It's like therapy, where therapy is just like a liberal talks at you until you fucking snap, you know?
Oh god.
I'm just being shitty, but also correct. And so like OTO finally had its first like big national meeting recently, and it was in fucking Denver. And so the benefit is that you get to get really high when you show up, and so maybe nothing will sink in. The entire first day of their lectures was all diversity, equity, inclusion.
Okay.
Which is the equivalent of like the human resources lady is in the office today, and you all need to show up on time, and we're going to spend the first 2 hours of the work shift. Human resources has something to say, and it's not to say that there's not very important things that they're saying there. But what the fuck does it have to do with Thelema?
Sure.
And it's like every 2 years we're gonna, you know, calling all OTO members in the United States, you know, come one, come all. This is the thing, or you know, this is our Juggalo event, the Dark Carnival. This is our Dark Carnival. And,
I haven't heard that in a while.
And ICP won't be here, but and it's like, what?
So there's no
ICP's not here. Twisted,
yeah.
and day one, I've got to get talked at by a human resources lady. Like, what the fuck, you know? It's like, God, I bought all this heroin for nothing. I thought about the Dark Carnival the other day, and I'm like, God, I hope it's still going on when my kids are grown enough to be able to
get
handle
sprayed with Fago.
No, to handle themselves in a fist fight. You know?
Oh, I see. Yeah.
I'm like, I would love to be able to introduce my kids to this inexplicable anomaly of the 90s. And the only problem is that there's a lot of fist fights that happen.
Yeah.
And if that was true of Noticon and the OTO, their national conference, there'd be a lot more fun. I'd prefer a fist fight than having to listen to the HR people fucking talk at me.
That's funny.
Thank you. I tried.
So, you mentioned the Sephiroth earlier. What is, if you don't mind sharing, your understanding of the Qliphoth or the Qliphoth?
I don't know. I don't really have too much one. Like, it's like they're the shells and they're in the midden, and do you know what the midden means?
I was just about to say that I've never heard them explained or described as a midden, but like it's like a sewer system or something, right?
No, it literally means shells. And so like like you're in a port, and you've got all these guys that you really hope you're cool with because they're killers, and they also have a lot of fucking oysters and clams. And they're out there on the fucking coast shucking oysters all day, and they throw their oysters into a great big pile of shells. And that's the midden.
Interesting.
And so to be cast out upon the midden is to be thrown into the fucking shit pile of rotten bottom feeder. They're not crustaceans; they're crusty.
or gastropods.
I tell you what, they are delicious, and unfortunately expensive. Even in fucking Louisiana, you can get an oyster for less than $1 today. Pre-Katrina, I get an oyster for a nickel, $1 today.
I love the idea of explaining them in shells like oysters and clams, because those, I'm not sure which one, but one of those often contain pearls.
Oysters.
Oysters? Yeah.
I don't know.
So there's really no utility there in your practice as far as you're concerned?
No, I mean, like the probationer in AA is assumed to be living among the shells. And so mystically in the system of Thelema, the shells are what's called in the holy books the old gray land, which is just the fucking world, or the uneducated person or troglodyte or whatever living in the world. And so you experience, if you're walking across dunes of oysters, it's like you're going to cut your feet open, it's painful, and there's nothing there.
Interesting.
And so that's its own thing. But people try to work spirits, clipotic spirits, and I can't find it now. My bottle of Samael wine, right? Like Samael is the king of the clipot, right?
He's well, Samael is one of the clipotic spears that Adramelech is the archdemon of.
Isn't Samael the Kether of the Tree of Death?
It's Hode.
Okay.
It's the Hode sphere.
I believe you.
At least in the traditions that I've studied. It might be different.
Yeah, I try to stay out of the bad neighborhoods. Get stabbed or robbed. But yeah, so a lot of people try to work that, but I don't know how necessary it is. I think that people try to kind of like pin their identity to the Kabbalistic model because it gives them access above and below. But people are much more interested in the below than they are in the above often. And for I like, you know, I think it was Alan Bennett that told Crowley when Crowley was goofing off at the Golden Dawn.
Yeah.
He was like, "You've been meddling in the Goetia," and
he's like, no. Yeah.
Crowley's trying to be cheeky about it. And I told the story to the kids tonight. I used when I lived in China, I would go. You could cupping, the fire cupping on your back, right? And in this like weird old neighborhood that I lived in, and then right around the corner they had super spicy food, and they would the Mangren, the blind people, but they weren't blind; they were just like crazy nearsighted. And it makes me think that it was like like the Chinese government would give them jobs in these kinds of clinics, which makes me think that it was like the Chinese government accidentally fucking destroyed the sight of a lot of people, and in their way of compensating for it. I don't know though, but it was peculiar. And again, I'm not trying to get you demonetized by YouTube/Zhonghua.
This is not about making money for me.
It's good of you. But yeah, so these blind ladies, and it was called the Blind Man Massage Parlor. And so but I just wanted the cupping, but they'd always grab my ass. Yeah. They're like, you have a lot of pain in your ass. I'm like, I fucking do now. Jesus. Not really. But they put the cups on my back and then look at the purple circles on my back. Look, I was fucking attacked by an octopus.
Right.
Oh, you have a lot of fire in you. And it's like oh, you might be referring to the fire you just put in the cup and then attached my back, you know. But they're like, you have a lot of fire in you. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna fuck with them. And so they were like, do you drink? I'm like, no, you know, smoke cigarettes, do you eat spicy food? No, you know. And then because that would be, the fire was indicative of the awesome lifestyles. And then and so I would go to the she just think it's awesome. But yeah, so I would go to this like a super excellent fucking brittle pepper restaurant right around the corner from them, 200 meters from them. And I would eat the spiciest food and I'd drink their strongest liquor and I'd chain smoke. And then I'd go and they'd put the fire cups in my back and they'd be like, oh my God, you have a lot of fire in you. Like, I don't know. I don't know what
you're talking about. Yeah.
Took all your fucking advice last time. But anyway, advice. You've been meddling in the Goetia. It's good. You know, and for Crowley in his system, he's like, okay, you know, you follow the book of Sacred Magic of Rommel and the Mage, which is where the old Hasidic term, the Kabbalistic term was devukut, which means to cling, right?
Mhm.
And so you grab above,
Uh-huh.
and then you extend that grace below,
Hmm.
and not
Exactly.
you know, but there's some Crowley suggestions that suggest that the opposite could also be a course of action for people. And honestly, some of the best Thelemites I've met are people that meddled in the Goetia, so to
Uh-huh.
speak, before
Uh-huh.
they got into Thelema, and so they got their feet wet by doing fucked up black magic, and then they started pursuing the Thelemic career.
Mm.
But that's not how Abramelin designed it. And the idea is that you cling up above and then you extend your grace below.
Yeah. Yeah. Once you achieve that KNC of the HGA, you summon the four like crown princes of hell to like get them under your dominion, essentially, in the Abramelin ritual. Um, for me, it's also an exploration of the shadow, because for me, like Jung said that a tree's branches can't grow to hell unless it's, or a tree's branches can't grow to heaven unless its roots grow to hell. And Dante said that the path to paradise begins in the inferno. So a lot of times I look at it as a sort of like draining the swamp, so to speak, or like dredging through the midden, I suppose.
You trying to get me by referencing draining the swamp?
Yeah, I'm like, is that a dog whistle?
Maybe not. Well, and isn't there like Liber 231 is like Liber Carcerii or something? Isn't that dedicated to the Clipot?
Yes, but it's pretty obscure, and I don't know many people that have really attempted to like penetrate the mysteries of that.
Hmm.
I have a little bit, but it's mostly in like ritual actions, such as describing all those symbols upon the door of my temple, going out, and
Uh-huh.
then describing some effigy of the angel on my temple going in and whatnot.
Okay.
But Crowley really doesn't elaborate on it very much. So how it's specifically supposed to be used, unless I'm an idiot and missed that, is
It's very vague and obscure. And I think it should be for more than one reason. One, to protect people, but also two, I think I've found it so far so subjective that as soon as you begin saying what it is or what it isn't, like it loses utility, perhaps.
um, for you maybe, but it gains utility for it.
Yeah, sure, sure.
Like Crowley maybe could have taken his own advice towards his introduction to his illustrated Goetia,
Uh-huh.
where it's kind of a response to wait, and he says the Goetia's a bunch of fucking shit, and and Crowley responds and he says, Mr. Waite, the world of magic is a world of mirrors, and
Right.
what sees muck is muck.
Hmm.
And that's really a clever thing to say, but you could also say it to anybody about anything.
Sure, sure.
It's not necessarily a good jab, but it is. I would say it is in this sense. From the prophet Sam Hyde, he describes a neurotic person that's trapped in the modern world,
Hmm.
as a person in the propaganda that frightens you and compels you to try to sprint your way through the fun house, the Hall of Mirrors.
Right.
It's a Hall of Mirrors, right? And
Mhm.
so it's like these contortions of yourself that you're seeing, and they're all like fucking nightmarish. And then eventually you just don't get out. And so like what happens to that person? I feel like this is like a fantasy fiction motif of the person trapped in a nightmare forever. It's true for Crowley, like in the Vision of the Voice,
Uh-huh.
and his engagement with Karunzen is
Yeah.
that
Mhm.
Karunzen self affirmation, and so how would you possibly get there? It's where you isolate yourself against any sort of criticism, or at least the self affirmation that is your fucking daily bread is so great and overwhelming a part of your diet that that nothing else really matters. You can't ingest anything else. I wrote a little thing recently about this when it comes to Crowley's use of the Eucharist.
Right.
That he says in Liber Samech, which is kind of it's a Brahman operation with a bit of a spin, and also with it's a lot shorter, and it's it's derived from the Bornless One invocation, and which is a fascinating ritual that Thelemites don't talk about enough. In a lot of senses, it's really, really incredible and mysterious. And Crowley, this aside, put a lot of stock in other shit. Like I think that the Bornless One being referred to is actually chaos that's spoken of in the Vision of the Voice and the Gnostic Mass and elsewhere. Anyway, but I'm working on that. I'm working on that fucking essay. But the but yeah, with the in Liber Samech, like a lot of kind of Crowley B-sides, he wrote a long commentary to it.
Sure.
And in some of his like B-side commentaries that are the most interesting insight into his mystical magic.
Right.
For Samech, for Reguli, his commentaries on the holy books, they're really incredible. And in Samech, he says, the Bornless, Ya Bez, Ya Apofras Ra. And he says that Bez, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to quote it perfectly, but it's the flesh, it's the bread, the flesh that's consumed for the purpose of the, and it's poison, consumed for the purpose of the incarnation of any god. And Apophras Ra is the venom of Apophis poison, which is consumed for the purpose of the incarnation of any god. And so there's a lot of whittling away of the person for that. And I don't remember how I segued this, but it's a very, very interesting thing. Lao Tzu even talks about this. He's like, it's always translated very badly. I don't remember the exact Chinese, but it's like in becoming less, you become more, right?
Right.
And the Chinese verb is sun, which is to diminish, right? And so the more you take away from yourself, the greater you are. And it's a funny paradox of aspiration that people think affirmation is the positive thing, which like Stuart Smalley. But it might actually be the exact opposite is the case, is through humiliation, which is how it's really the only way that at least a man learns humility is through humiliating himself. And God bless women, they can humble themselves, instinctively. But for a man, you've really got to fucking hang your ass out constantly to learn anything about yourself. It's like God, I'm the scorn of all my peers in society. If it were the good old days, I'd be strung up by this point. Maybe I should walk myself back a little bit. But that was my point. Is that so if the bread and the wine are poison, then you're reducing yourself. But like to what end? It's for the purpose of the knowledge conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel. It's for the purpose of the invocation. You are, in a sense, ritually, to reduce it to a platitude, suspending your own disbelief on a very deep level.
Right.
So that you're amenable to the beyond. Yeah. and you know, it's hard to hear the signal through all the noise. And you could say that, like, oh well, you know, I'm just gonna sit in my asana until my fucking heels dig into my ass bone in a painful way, and then I get up and it's like, whoa, I feel a rush. I'm momentarily exhilarated. Is this not samadhi? No, it's not. It's just like you're catching your breath and your ass doesn't hurt quite as much anymore. And there's other ways of doing that.
Perhaps.
But then what? And it's like, if there's nothing, if there's no beckoning, then there's not going to be any response. And I think that that's where, like, this psychologistic obsession with the interiority of practice that is solely emphasized by a lot of contemporary so-called Thelemites, such as Lon Duquette or David Shoemaker. They say, you know, they're prescribing all of this like self-help shit and all this Jungian shit, and maybe there's gems there, but really they're in the idea that it's all this internal strife that you're trying to sort out. It implies the rejection. It implies the disbelief in an external locus of volition and identity. And I don't know, like I don't think any system is like self-contained and self-important. And I don't think any tree matters. We're not for the forest, and I don't think any person matters if not for their will and its relevance to other people. And so I think that, you know, like the Crowley very much emphasized the Eucharistic stuff, and in De Cultu in Liber Aleph, he's like De Cultu of cult, right? You could translate it, but it's cult and it's culture and it's cultivation. If not ennoblement, hopefully also ennoblement. But he prescribes, and not just cultivation, but the horticulturalist, but ennoblement, the viticulturalist. It's about bringing these things in a methodical way, and he prescribes all these practices, and one of them is like, neglect not the daily Eucharist, whether it be by the rite of the Gnostic Mass or the rite of the Phoenix. Those are a couple of rituals that he described and published, or and he wrote other Eucharistic rituals that are secret, and he but it's also like he just left notes like, here's how you construct a Eucharistic ritual. Good luck, dude. And the and you know, there's Thelemites that go to they go to mass regularly, right? And they put their money in the fucking wicker basket that's passed around. It's like, well, I'm gonna put an extra $5 in this basket. It's wicker. I love wicker furniture. My mama used to fucking spray this with white spray paint.
Yeah.
My mama did. I got all sorts of wicker furniture from her, and so yeah. But actually not. My fat ass broke through all of it. But my point is that, like, it's a prescribed thing, and there's plenty of Thelemites that do it with some regularity. But that wasn't. It's not the sun, the reduction is not it, right? It's also the invocation of the light from beyond, and so, like, oh, this is your shadow self, your anima or whatever, your animal, who is the best Muppet. And but it's like, no, it's not that. It's an external locus of volition and identity, because and this is my argument, and I don't, it's novel, I think, in terms of polemic discussion of like the will and its relevance, so on, is that you're literally just trying to get in touch with a hierarchy of angels that are purportedly in charge of the course of human destiny, so that you're trying to enlist in this army. And your first question is, what are my orders? And it's funny, like, to be literal with that, Crowley and Moonchild, Peter Pendragon, his orders are, he had some sort of a vision or an inspiration about a new model of helicopter so that English could win the war.
Right.
What Archie Bunker called the big one, and so it was very, very direct and very literal. And so I think that, like, that might be a healthier mystical attitude. Is like, I'm here to serve. I'm here to take orders. And it's like, oh, this in this cake and in this blood, I'm goosing myself. It's like it's actually a reductive act, so that you can be amenable to the divine, right? They're not strengthening your moral frame; they're making it vulnerable to the spiritual dimensions, so that you can communicate with people that have somehow managed to suspend their life beyond the flesh. And that's the real evocatory stuff. And it's like I find that I spend, when I'm explaining Philemon to people that come to me, I'm spending a lot of time trying to walk them back from the preponderance of mystical and religious notions today, that it's about getting away. It's about affirming your goodness for yourself or for God or something. And because we're so far away from that, which is to imply that my understanding was the norm forever. Like, religion was tied in with your duty and also your privileges in relation to your role in the world, even if it's a little microcosm, like your tribe or something like that, your church, your parish, even, like that was your religious obligation, to the point where, like, your bishop says, like, we're gonna go fuck up that other bishop's shit, fine, I'm ready. Let me get my axe. I'm a woodcutter. But I was joking earlier tonight. You've got all these, like, trades names, as surnames for people today. Alan Smith or John Baker or whatever. And it's like, it would be funny to have modern trades as surnames today, like Jeff Pipe Fitter.
Yeah.
John Computer Scientist or something, whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it kind of goes to show how fragmented everything has become. I mean, because we had like Schumacher is a name that you mentioned earlier. Smith, nowadays, you're right. It would be like Dave Auto Mechanic, or something like that, or I don't know. It just, we're in an interesting place in our society where, like you said, a lot of the major careers are not like public service, or aren't detrimental to the infrastructure.
Yeah. Could you imagine your name being John Adjuster?
Or accountant? Yeah.
Or people call him Carl from Sling Blade, right? But he would actually be Carl, the guy that's fucking great with lawnmowers.
Yeah. Two-stroke engine. Yeah.
But like I was saying earlier, it's we're so divorced from any it's like your dad tells you, like, well, you can be whatever you want to be. Gee, thanks, Dad.
Right.
I saw the fucking TV too, like, TV not helpful, Dad not helpful. And it's like, if you're lucky, you can make $1, as Mickey Blue Eyes would say.
Yeah.
But the you making a dollar? Yeah, making a dollar. But it's like it's not affirming, nor is it even necessarily correct. And like I said earlier, like the blacksmith's son in the good old days had no delusions about what his true will was. And it's not just because like the career that he's necessarily going to fall into is that of a blacksmith, but also that his dad was a blacksmith and he was viable enough to procreate and make a little boy, and that little boy's got strong arms. And so it's right for him to be a blacksmith because he's got strong arms and a sturdy enough frame to fucking strike an anvil, which is a hard life for people then, probably now. The YouTube blacksmiths I see, they look pretty good. They're doing all right, and they're a little long in the tooth, but they're not crippled or anything. When apparently, like the life of a blacksmith in their 30s or 40s, but that's a hell of a thing to be a blacksmith, and so like there was no illusions about that. And it's like imagine applying like contemporary standards about free will or some bullshit like that. And it's like like you travel back in time. This is almost like a funny sketch idea. And you find the blacksmith's son, and you're like hey man, you can do anything. You've got all the what jobs are available to you? What jobs are there around here? A scribe? You could be a scribe. I can't read. You could learn to read. I don't have time. And my arms are strong. And my father was a great blacksmith. And it's like, no, you could be a scribe because letters are important. And so is education. And it's like, but we're you that's put on people today, and it works because the family and the society is diminished to the point of where they have no fucking input, and so nobody is my point. But yeah, it's like, hey man, hey blacksmith's boy, time traveling Thelemite, are you sure it's your true will to be a blacksmith? Like it's a ridiculous question. And so like the point I've been trying to make in some of my essays recently is that it's a ridiculous question, except for in the absence of any sense of what's fucking going on in the world.
Yeah.
Crowley, did you ever read Heart of the Master?
No, it was on my list, and I think I sort of like moved on to other studies, but it definitely rings a bell.
It's cool. It was written when Crowley was recovering from heroin, and kicked out of Italy, and apparently it's a lot easier to get heroin in Italy than it is in Tunisia. Probably true today also.
Makes sense, yeah.
I never had to score heroin in Europe or Africa, but I've been in both Italy and Tunisia, and so Crowley's in Tunisia, and he's like, "Fuck Mussolini!" Oh, he's going through
because of prohibition, probably.
Yeah,
as well as other things. There's more. I'm sure he was saying that about Mussolini more than just the fact that he couldn't score heroin, but
yeah. So he's fucking suffering. He's like, and they're like, he's like, "Do you have any heroin?" Like, the best we can do is opium tea. He's like, fine. There was a bishop. There is a bishop in Norway, Otto bishop, and he did a lecture in Seattle in like 2009, and it was a very good lecture. And sadly, it was taken off of YouTube, and it's because I quoted this portion too much, but I wrote him recently, and he was like, "No, it wasn't because of you." And I'm like, nobody else is quoting this shit, and, but it's a brilliant essay, and it was like the history of the OTO through the eyes of Aleister Crowley in terms of like what he understood it to be important for. And one of the things that Crowley wanted, it was for the OTO to be like sleeper cells,
right,
but
right,
to be like a body of people that could be mobilized if need be to protect against the smash, where the smash means the smash of the socialists.
Right.
And knowing Crowley's sentiments and what he wanted the OTO for, it was to protect the aristocracy. And so maybe Crowley had in his mind, he's like, the socialists are going to start fucking, Kristallnacht, they're smashing windows, and the OTO is going to get in the game. We're going to.
Not to interject, but that's so interesting to me because the majority of Thelemites I've come across are sort of postmodernist iconoclast. They're very postmodern about their ideology, and the postmodernists tend to want to upturn the hierarchy, from what I can tell. So that's an interesting. That's interesting to me.
Well, going back to Lao Tzu or Strauss is that it's the idea that you have enlightened people, and they don't destroy the power mechanism. They appropriate it by putting this. You become. Leo Strauss's On Tyranny is the perfect book for this. And I forget the Greek dialogue that he talks about, but it's something where there's a tyrant who Strauss defines as an unlawful ruler, right? And for the Greek, like, oh, he was elected, oh, he's the conqueror, right? He came from fucking Asia Minor, Anatolia, and he conquered our polis. He's the rightful leader. It's like, is he right by the people? And so that's really, for the Greeks, a racial idea. He's our leader, and therefore we give a shit about him. But whatever, doesn't matter so much for Strauss. But the tyrant in On Tyranny is somebody that he's not supposed to be where he is, and he doesn't deserve power that he has, and but there he is, and he's adult, and nobody can seem to really have any purchase on him as far as influencing his policy, behavior, or whatever, and except for the wizard. And so, except for the philosopher, and the job of the philosopher is to ingratiate himself with the aristocracy, however wild or stupid or errant they might be, and to do kind of a worm tongue, and get them to steer things in the right direction, because the philosopher knows good from bad, but the tyrant is just, he's the strongest guy in the crowd,
right?
And how he ended up where he is. He's the ham-fisted ruler, but you're the voice of discretion, and so yeah, like for Crowley, his idea was you can invade the area. So for OTO, it wasn't supposed to be initiating people that fucking don't have a dollar. It wasn't supposed to be initiating people that are just like super psyched about Thelema and getting in on the magic and the ceremonies and initiations. For Crowley, he was trying to invade the space of Freemasons,
right,
and recruit influential or affluential Freemasons or aristocrats otherwise to so that it's very Illuminati, right? So that the real power center, which is AA, could determine the course of things in the world very directly. And like you could think of OTO as the central nervous system, whilst AA is the brain, right? And the flesh is the fucking world. And it's like, God damn, you look skeletal at this point. But yeah, so that's where like protecting against the socialist smash comes from. It wasn't that Crowley wasn't sympathetic to their ideas. Like there's places where Crowley talks about what you could call universal health care, there's places where he talks about minimum wage for direct, and these are obviously like policy ideas. They're not ideas about like that socialists discuss today, like the threat of white supremacy, which Crowley would not have been concerned about. And,
Probably not.
well, he would have said to each their own. And actually, I'm working on an essay now, and it's a hard essay to write because it appeals mostly to Crowley shit that nobody's ever read because the OTO censors it, and it's this and it drives home because people have this idea of Thelema as being like atomization, where like it's all about you doing your will. Fuck everybody else, fuck your dad, not fuck your dad in like the come down sense, but like disregard his opinions, disregard the opinions of society. You do you, brah. And it's like, God, who am me? Oh, Instagram has a lot of ideas as to who me am, and they go with that. And so this atomization is insane, right? And like I said earlier, like Nietzsche's, I was talking to somebody, the greatest danger, Gelbsgefahr or something, I don't know the German, but in the gay sciences, the sudden eruption of madness. And Nietzsche says it's when the many think that they are the few,
Right.
which is to say that everybody thinks special, and and everybody is special, but not everybody's special in a very special way, right? Not everybody is like really stands out, but like in as much as theoretically everybody has true will, everybody's special in their own way. It's just like not in orders of magnitude. It reminds me of this brilliant historical documentary I saw, 10,000 Years BC.
The film, or
Yeah,
was it an actual documentary?
It was a real documentary with live footage
Okay.
from fake ass Egypt.
Okay, I'm like, this rings a bell. Yeah, I think I've seen that film.
No, it was this like kitschy movie that was made like 15 years ago. It was fun.
Yeah,
But it's a good movie to watch.
I liked it. Yeah, I liked it.
But there's a funny scene, and it's like some men have the dimension of their importance in the world is only in themselves.
Mhm.
God bless them. Don't get too close to them, right? And some people, their diameter is their family, and some people in their society, and some people in the world, right? They have world spanning dimensions of their will, their
Sure.
importance.
Yeah.
Yeah. My favorite thing about the movie is how they depicted the evil Pharaoh as a white guy with
I
red hair.
vaguely remember that. Yeah.
Kind of looked like Peter O'Toole, and and it's like fair enough. Ramses II was a white guy.
Yeah, he was probably Greek. Yeah. Yeah.
No, I don't think he was Greek.
Okay.
I think he, in terms of like the diaspora from the Russian steppe, there were waves of people that moved through North Africa thousands of years before the like the fucking Dorians and the Mycenaeans. Yeah, Mycenaeans went through the Aegean and entered the Levant.
That makes sense.
And so there were waves, and like you have like ancient Russian steppe genetics in Spain and among the Basque that were not brought there by later waves from the Yamnaya whatever people. And so it's like where did they get this Russian steppe DNA from? It was carried through the, what do they call it, the Maghreb, the West, which is North Africa, a couple thousand years before, and maybe not a couple thousand years before, but as is always the case, like where did the Egyptians get chariots from, right? And fucking the white man up in Russia didn't domesticate horses first. It was East Asians that did that. And they didn't invent the wheel first. It was Anatolians. But these steppe people were the first to say, like, hey man, you ever think about wheel plus horse? and then they're just fucking rioting,
Yeah.
gangster style everywhere.
Yeah. Then you
And
got a bow and arrow, and then you're sold. You're gold.
yeah, it's like, oh, we cheesed the game.
Yeah. A little bit too OP. Yeah.
In the sequel to the game, they're totally going to delete this, but right
Yeah.
now,
They're gonna nerf it for sure.
and and yeah, and so like I think that's the, and I've argued with people about this on the internet where you argue, and it's like yeah, I get that Egypt is in Africa and that it's traditionally been populated by Semitic people from Arabia, and but it doesn't change the fact that their rulers came from elsewhere, as often the case with things, where you have conquerors come in and they do their genetics as much as they feel like, but really they're just like happy being, the king of the mountain. A very interesting thing, a study came out maybe 7 or 8 years ago, and it was anytime you watch a movie about Romans, where Romans are, you watch Caligula with Malcolm McDowell, and all the Romans always speak with a very proper, not that I know anything about the shit, English accent.
Sure.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Um, and because the British believe that in as much as they were colonized by Rome for a spell, they're the descendants of the Romans.
Mm-hmm.
But genetic studies of recent years have showed that the Romans left no genetic footprint in the English population today or historically. And so at some point the Romans that ruled England for a while were like, the empire is kind of falling apart. I'd rather live in France. They got and so like for the Egyptian aristocracy and all their inbreeding, right? Like, do you really see this stamp on the Egyptian population today? No. But you compare the DNA of the pharaohs and of then, and they are 90% modern Europeans and 10% Anatolians. So it's an interesting thing.
That is interesting. Yeah, it's interesting too. You have people like Genghis Khan who allegedly spread their DNA like crazy, and only certain people have heard the name Genghis Khan, but everybody knows who the Roman Empire is. Everyone knows who Julius Caesar is, but as you mentioned, they may have left a very nominal genetic footprint.
Yeah, fucking Genghis Khan was spreading the seed on horseback. It was just at full gallop.
Oh, the imagery.
Doesn't sound that bad, does it?
It depends on where you are, whether you're the horse or the maiden or Genghis Khan. I suppose it could be a different perspective.
It sounds challenging.
It does sound challenging. Yeah, it brings a new meaning to horseback archery.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's like, who's the comedian? She was like, man can throw a football through a tire 100 yards away, but he can't fucking not piss on the toilet seat. It's like, yes, both, but we choose to piss all over the toilet seat. Well, that's Genghis Khan. He's like master of horseback archery, and he's also hitting targets. People brag about, politicians. We can walk and chew gum.
Mm-hmm.
Like, can you fucking can you fuck and chew gum at the same time
Without biting your tongue?
If what's going to establish your rhythm? Is your gum your metronome, or
or the song in the background?
That's probably the best way. you just put on 9 Inch Nails. Like,
there's some Barry Manilow or something.
I kind of feel like Alex Jones with Joe Rogan in 2017, where Alex like Trump won, and Joe Rogan invites Alex Jones on, and he's like, and Alex Jones eventually is like, I'm Alex Jones in this, right? And I'm pointing, and it's like, you say you don't know about this stuff, but you know everything I'm talking
He's like,
about.
you know what I'm talking about, Joe. This is super heavy galactic stuff.
Which is it doesn't matter. You could be a fucking art major and appreciate Alex Jones and Joe Rogan, but yeah, I feel like you know your stuff pretty well, at least in breadth.
I've tried to be relatively well read, and I've tried to keep an open mind, and I've tried to be humble, and that has allowed me the opportunities and the privileges to spend a lot of time studying. I appreciate the compliment. It's definitely been a pleasure speaking with you. Was there anything else that you wanted to cover? Perhaps maybe your plans for the future? You've mentioned a few essays, so it seems like you enjoy writing.
Yeah, I like writing, and I'm shy, and so um, and so it's been through a lot of encouragement over years that I actually started to produce writing and making it available for people. But people seem to enjoy it, which is good. Are you setting me up to plug my Substack?
I am now.
www.crowstake.com.
Okay.
I'm crowstake.com.
And
Or
yeah, I'll put that link in the description too, so people can just click on it.
or doitthouwilt.substack.com. I think it goes to the same thing. But I crank shit out pretty regularly, and it's been fun. And I've had a sport in antagonizing the OTO, and which I was kicked out of, and it was for very frivolous political things. Because in recent years, people became, not everybody, but enough people became very obsessed with. I don't know if they like Neuralink had a prototype for people, and it was just like a little sensor that people put in their brains, and like to where NPR could press a button and be like outrage time, and then that's what people go off on. But it certainly seems like that, for a lot of people. And I had a lot of very, very good friends in the OTO that I cared about a lot, and then all of a sudden they became malicious backstabbers. Not to be pointed, but they became the intrusion of vulgar politics into a secret society.
Right.
Something that, God bless them, Freemasons anticipated a lot better than the OTO did. And I have my white man nicotine. You get a sponsor out of this. My Zen pouches. It's like dip, but for people that don't want to every 5 minutes go.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so masonry, like no politics. And even a cousin of mine was over here earlier. We had a thing to go to, so she came and babysat the baby with her baby. This is Dixie, man. We have babies here. and she came by, and I'm like, tell your husband to fucking give me a call whenever he's going saltwater fishing. I'll go saltwater fishing. And I'm like, what does he like to talk about? She's like nothing. And I'm like, great.
Yeah.
Finally in my life, I don't have to fucking talk manically and keep somebody's attention. But she's like, yeah, he doesn't have any fishing buddies anymore because one of his buddies was this guy, and he was and I'm listening to her, and she's describing a Freemason. Freemason, yeah. And she's like, I Googled it, and they can't talk about politics or God. And these are nice Southern Christian people. Like, about politics, God. And I knew about the politics thing, I don't know about the God thing. But for a Freemason, you can join. You just can't be an atheist, right?
Yeah.
Whom do you trust? You can say you can be a fucking a be a member of the Church of Reddit and say the flying spaghetti monster, and they're like, good enough for us.
I think the stipulation is the belief in a supreme being. I think is how it's worded, but I could be wrong about that. I'm not a Mason.
I would say the Elder Brain from Baldur's Gate 3.
Wow. Okay.
Bring it back to now. You thought I had obscure references from the past. No, I have obscure references from the present. But yeah, I am a parasite, you know. But that's what she said, and I'm not bad at people, but they're normal, you know. It's like, but that's like conventional morality is you believe, you know, if you believe in something and you're a good person, you go to heaven. And it's like, oh, that's what Jesus said.
Yeah.
And it's also, that sucks, you know, like the coolest part of Christianity was being able to like go to heaven while all your shitty friends go to hell. And you've got like live CCTV, and you can watch them getting fucking burning alive. You're like,
That's rough. Yeah. Yeah.
But I forgot I brought that up. But yeah, I was talking shit about the OTO. Yeah, I don't know what the fuck they're doing.
Feel free to vent.
No, because it's boring. Because like it's so, or like I was in the OTO for almost 20 years, and it was like it's a thing because like I was never a member of like an established OTO body. Have you ever hung out with OTO?
A little bit. I have some friends that are in the OTO, and I was part of a thelemic order that was not the OTO for a very short period of time, and I still maintain connections with some of them. But yeah, I was not a part of the OTO, but I am aware of some of their policies, you might say.
Well, what's funny is like they're the curators of Aleister Crowley's estate.
Yeah.
But also they're responsible for the continuation of that estate. And it's like, it just sucks that they don't publish his books, to the point of where like the essay that I'm working on now attempts to, I'm going to say that OTO deliberately does not want Aleister Crowley published. When you look at the preponderance of these like publishing situations, it's just like there's not only is there no apology at all for their inability to publish the most basic shit they've been promising to publish for decades, but but it's like it's so bad that it's like this could only be the case if they were just trying to not publish Crowley.
So to interject really quickly, if I take a step back and I analyze that from like a culty psychological perspective, this is just speculation. I'm not saying this is the case, but do you think that might have something to do with if they were to release the things that Crowley said, that the OTO wouldn't be needed as much because people could sort of analyze it themselves?
No, because a lot of what they've been promising to publish for a while is shit that's already been published, but in poorly edited or incomplete forms.
Okay.
I think they're deliberately not publishing stuff, and I can point to examples of things that they obviously, and they like Hymenaeus Beta says very overtly that he's not publishing, and or through legal action shows that he doesn't want to publish. I think they don't like Aleister Crowley, and I think they don't. Yeah, I think they don't like Aleister Crowley because he's too much of a. I'm going to do Reddit fingers here. A product of his own time, right? And a Victorian. Right? He's an Edwardian. Give the guy a break. And so, but the thing is, like, this very kind of do what thou will. It means, you know, go with it, man. Is very much in step with contemporary morality, the contemporary religion, the secular religion of today, Enlightenment liberalism or something, some contortion of it, and so that works. And all the people that are in charge of, mostly the people that are in charge of OTO, are still fucking liberal boomers that are, like, if Jimmy Buffett died on his deathbed said that he loved the Book of the Law, it would be the greatest day of their lives, right?
That's hilarious.
And it's just like, well, it's people are pleasure, like the whole goal. This is very true in Louisiana because it's an opulent culture. People are entertaining and pleasuring themselves to death. Like that is the goal of human life, is like having,
Hedonism, perhaps.
yeah, you'd call it hedonism or materialism, but like but if it's all about you and it's all about your therapeutic society, like where do you go to college? Oh, to learn about yourself.
Huh.
No thanks. I
Yeah.
know too much about me already. Can I learn a fucking trade and be productive in the world? No. and and so and this is my like anti-mysticism, but
I mean,
hmm?
I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with, like, maybe not anti-mysticism, but I think it's definitely beneficial as a magician to sort of look at the downsides of mysticism. And like you mentioned, like, I don't think it was the brahmacharyas or the brahmacharyas, because you were talking about Taoism, but the people living in the mud huts. I mean, there's only so much utility in that. I think that, moderation in all things, so to speak. Like, yeah, take some time for yourself, but if you're just here to think about yourself, then why did you incarnate into a society? I guess is how I think about it.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm not against mud huts. It's
Right.
just like their idea was that these Chan Buddhists are going to live and die in these mud huts,
Right.
and is the closest real world equivalent that I know of.
Right. Right.
Brain in a jar. Maybe Jeffrey Epstein knows otherwise, but knows, I say, because he's still alive. But yeah, it's like you're reckless. You're removing yourself from society. And it's like, why? Because you think you're so fucking important. Like your soul is so good that the greatest thing you can attain to is irrelevance. Yeah. God bless you, man. You're really fucking rocking the free world here. No, it's like we live among, we're people and we live among people, but I really think Nietzsche had the best idea concerning this sort of like practical mysticism, is that we're going to be, and Jesus Christ, could Nietzsche have conceived of this level while he was alive, of like alienation from reality that people experience today? I don't know. And but the but for him, like the purpose of philosophy, of course, there's ennoblement, right? That's one purpose of philosophy for one audience of listener that you want to be understood by. But there's another people that you want to be misunderstood by, or rather, understood by differently.
Yeah.
And the purpose for them is to get them to calm the fuck down. But you can't. What was that funny scene? You ever see Animal House with Belushi?
It's been a while, but yeah.
And there's a funny scene where like all hell is breaking loose at the end of the parade.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And one of them is pretending to be a cop or something.
Uh-huh.
And he has a megaphone. And like there's a riot in the streets, and he's panning, and he's saying like, calm down. All is well. Right? That's not gonna work forever. Right. It's not going to work when all hell has broken loose. And so, like another purpose of the philosopher, he says in the greatest danger, 281, I think it might be, in gay science is a philosopher shouldn't try to trick people into thinking that they're all so fucking special, because people intuitively know that that's not the case. And they will but if you trick them, then they will spend their miserable lives trying to prove that that there was no reason for them to have been a normal person, right? And the world needs normal people. And so Nietzsche says that it's the job of a philosopher to um, encourage the stolid metronome. He says that of normal life. This is the you know I know like auto workers would disagree with me, but it's
Diogenes would probably disagree.
What?
I said Diogenes would probably disagree. There was a discourse somewhere between Plato and Diogenes about how Plato said if you knew how to court the royals, you wouldn't have to wash vegetables, and Diogenes said, well, if you knew how to wash vegetables, you wouldn't have to court the royals. What you said sort of reminded me of that discourse a little bit. Sorry, I digress.
But the royals are in a position of banning vegetables, so
Exactly. Yeah.
The
Uh-huh.
And you're probably going to get more out of royals than you are going to get out of vegetables, both in terms of benefits and adventure. Um, but yeah, the solid metronome. It's like
Mhm.
you just people to fucking. But Diogenes is a great example because um, it was Alexander appeared before him. That's the same Diogenes, right? The guy that lives in a fucking pipe.
He lived in squalor and basically was an abject of society, basically. But he is known to have said many wise things. Well, according to some.
Well, only in the abstract would my life be considered living in squalor and hating society, right?
Mhm.
But outside of that, I don't think I'd take advice from somebody that's there. I'd say cope and move on.
Sure.
But he said the famous thing is that Alexander appeared before him, right?
Mhm.
Because Diogenes was invoking the beyond or whatever in his pipe,
Mhm.
his sewer line outside the city, because it's like, God damn, you don't even deserve to live in the sewers in the city. And Diogenes or Alexander came to Diogenes. I've heard you know shit.
Mhm.
You know so much shit that I want to reward you. Ask anything of me. It's yours. I got you. Good man. You want mine? What do you want? Like fucking like Denzel in Training Day. Like anything, man. I got you. And Diogenes like, could you move to the left? You're standing in the sunlight.
Yeah, you're blocking my son. Yeah.
And it's an embarrassment for Alexander uh, more than Diogenes, because that implies that Alexander let him live.
Mm.
That we know that line. Alexander didn't just run him through.
Yeah.
Degenerate, indignant piece of shit. But it reminds me of after Hurricane Katrina. It was a meme, if you will, proto meme that it was there was a guy on a roof and the floodwaters were coming up, and sure enough, he was going to drown, and he was praying. He's like, God, come save me, God, come save me.
Oh yeah.
And then fucking a helicopter appeared, and a Navy SEAL was right there. He's like, come on, man, get you out of here. He's like, no, I'm waiting for God.
Right.
And the helicopter took off, and he fucking died. And little did he know
He
that
gets to heaven. Yeah.
that Navy SEAL was Jesus. And
Yeah. He gets to heaven and he's like, God, why didn't you save me? And it's like, I sent you a fucking helicopter.
yeah, hell.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know how much it cost me in gas? Even to lift this whirlybird off the fucking ground is grand in gas. And you're gonna burn me like that? Fuck you. Hell. I like the idea of Jesus as a Navy SEAL, but
I'm sure many Navy SEALs would like the idea of that as well.
blowing up the pipelines in the North Sea or whatever. Wrong, Ukraine. But yeah, tangential. But yeah, it's cool talking to you, man.
Absolutely.
You got anything else for me?
I think that's it. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. We got to cover a lot of things that we haven't covered on this channel so far. So yeah, I appreciate you sharing your time and your perspective with us. And I hope you have a good rest of the week.
Thanks, bud. You too. Yeah, I like to give my spin on Thelema because I try to appeal to the source stuff as opposed to the culture that proliferates it.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, there's a lot of disparity there.
Yeah.
And I fret because I believe that in the proposition Crowley, there's people that are up there that are in charge of directing the course of mankind, and they've established a correction for that course, and it's not really working out, and people are all psyched about all the shit that's fucking happening, and it's like okay, but at the same time, are you miserably depressed and concerned about like what's happening in your world and whatnot? Because if so, then maybe things aren't actually shaking out in the way that they need to be.
Hmm.
It's time to reassess. It's
Hmm.
time to pull back a little bit. It's time to, and and it's funny, like a lot of beef that I had with the OTO is because they were going to vulgar politics for an interpretation of Thelema. And not to sound like, though I think he's a very, very interesting person, Nick Fuentes, but
Hmm.
it's like, it's somebody that considers politics, but is always putting their values in front of politics. And so it's like, or like a Tucker Carlson, who says like, is this a good idea? Like, well, the Constitution, well, the electorate. It's like, okay. But like, is this or is this not a fucking catastrophe? Is this or is this not a nightmare that people with good sense disagree with? And that's what at least people that are, whatever, fuck their politics, but like that's what people that are plugged in need to be considering is like uh if this is the apocalypse, then is the shit that's floating around nowadays something that I want to fucking hook my sail to? And I would say um, radical, counter-revolutionary, reactionary skepticism is what's in order.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, I think I mean this is probably touching into another conversation, but I guess quickly I would say that skepticism is very healthy, especially in a postmodern undertaking. I can't help but equate iconoclasm and postmodernism, but they seem to be inextricably linked, and I I can't for the life of me fathom how so many people of tradition have fallen to the guise of iconoclasm and postmodernism. It seems like they're going to leave nothing in their wake except for destruction um, and chaos. And sure, chaos can be looked at as a ladder, but I'm not sure too many people are going to be able to climb. I look, and I've said this before. I look at humans as a link between the past and the future, and heaven and hell, so to speak. So if we're not carrying with us a sense of tradition, I'm not sure where we're going.
Yeah, I mean, there has to be some sort of historical context to your trajectory, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you haven't been charting the stars up to this point, then you're in a very bad position to determine where you are in the sea and what direction you need to head. I work with a lot of people that would be considered very like run of the mill conservative Christians, and they're great people. I love them. I love working with them. And but I often pose to them, it's like, you're talking about the Constitution like it's the Bible,
Hmm.
and for me, neither matter. And and uh, and it's like you love freedom of speech, but there's things like in the Bible that you purportedly would want to stop, to reject,
Mhm.
and or this like liberal lifestyle, right? That like being gay or something, and it's like you're like, oh no, I don't have a problem with that. Man wants to blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay, but like, isn't the just doesn't the Bible speak out against that, or at least like your interpretation of the Bible that comes from your church that
Yeah, the
you,
fundamental interpretation, or the fundamentalist interpretation, rather.
yeah, which for the majority of Christian history was the interpretation,
Hmm.
and it's like, or and people may think this is funny, but I put my kids in Catholic school because I think it's better for them to learn some sort of structure than whatever the whimsy of public school. And some of them went to public school, and I'm like, they're not learning anything here. Like, it's like they're not even they're not only are they not doing well, like they're not learning basic shit, right?
They're teaching politics before government these days, it seems.
Well, no, it's not so much that. It's that young kids, right? Young kids.
Yeah.
But it's that they are like the paradigm into which they're being indoctrinated is one of Rousseau's, and like it's extremely important that everybody have faith in the dogma, i.e., the axioms of the Enlightenment, and it's like, okay, but what if they're made up? What if you have a little skepticism here or something like that, but it's like the willy-nilliness of the teachings there. It's like Odysseus, I'd rather you learn something and be able to engage that than learn practically nothing and not have really anything to like kind of fill. There was a funny fucking comedian. He was a Boston comic. I forget his name. He had a big mustache. His act was he was a blue collar guy, and he said, "Yeah, I was raised Catholic, and that's a good thing because it gives you something to work out for the rest of your life." And that's funny, but it's also like actually true. Like it's better to have something that you can reciprocate with than nothing. Because if you've got nothing, and I try to instill thelema into my children. Like we break bread as often as we can, and which is a wine and a host, and it's kind of a my old bishop before I was nixed from OTO, dissolved, right? um, wrote this ritual, and it's kind of based on the Gnostic Mass, and we do that, and it didn't take more than 10 or 15 minutes.
Mhm.
There's a little bit of recital, and the kid, and I try to teach the kids what I know when I can in a way that's intelligible to them, because it's like you get into thelema and it's hardcore esoteric stuff. Like to really get it, you've got to really know shit, which is further evidence that it's not for everybody. And the but I still send them to Catholic school, so they've at least got something they can
Yeah,
engage.
it's a seed that's planted that they can decide which fruit to pick from.
Well, when I lived in New Orleans, there was this old white lady, and she played a fucking brass piano at
Wow.
bar. And sometimes they were dueling pianos, and sometimes there'd be another fellow there, and they'd fucking like dueling banjos. They'd play against each other, and it was such a cool thing. I worked in the French Quarter, and I worked at a patisserie, and that was kind of it's almost a chain in between Louisiana and Texas called the Madeleines, and but we were all stealing so much food from there. I was tight with the pastry chef, and he would fucking like I would leave every night with like a fucking Whole Foods sized bag full of fucking pastries. which is great because I was broke, even though I was taking all this money from the store. And I would bum around the French Quarter. I'd go into bars, and I'd be like creme brulee, and they'd be like whiskey sour. Here you go, It's good. But I'd bum into this bar, and I get this, and she played this beautiful brass piano, and I can't remember the name, but she told me what she said. I'm asking her like, how'd you learn piano? And she's like, oh, I learned all the classical stuff first. My parents put me through all, and I'm like, it's wild because you never play it. Like you do wild fucking compositions with yourself or with somebody else. And she said, well, you have to learn classical if you want to play jazz.
That reminds me of what Crowley said about you have to learn the rules before you can break them.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Interesting. I love that philosophy.
That's cool. That's heavy.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny because one of the things that I found interesting about Crowley was he said many of the things that I already thought in a more eloquent and concise way. And that was one of them. I always said, like, it's fine to break the rules, but you have to understand them first so you know which ones to break and how. And yeah, I came across that line and I was like, okay, so there's definitely some substance here that I can, that I can learn from.
So you're with me. We have to protect against the socialist smash. Because when
Seems that way.
When it's crystal knocked and they're just breaking fucking windows, like what's that going to result in? Strife for people, and it doesn't mean anything outside of like unrest. And there's a time and a place for general unrest. But
yeah, I think in the long run, this is how I see it. When I take a step back, and I look at what's going on, I see them pushing the marginalized up to the top of the pyramid while they're trying to invert the pyramid. They're trying to disestablish the hierarchy while simultaneously trying to lift the marginalized up to the top. I don't see how that's going to work. It's just going to whoop, whoop, and like flip right back around from what I can tell. But maybe that's another topic for another time.
No, but I agree with you. Like, there's a way to take care of people that are getting the short end of the stick, and but like, destroying everything helps no one.
I agree.
But I get the anger. I get the anger.
Yeah.
And sometimes like the villain in Mission Impossible 4 was kind of a good guy. You ever see that?
I don't think I've seen any past the second one.
I haven't seen 4 in many years, but I came out, I think I saw it in theaters and maybe that was it. But the villain was like some Norwegian, I guess you would call him an activist, and he's like, not to say anything negative against Norwegians. I have no problem with the Norwegian people. Please don't demonetize this YouTube channel for my perceived slight against the Norwegians. But he was like, he got a hand at some nukes like Norwegians do, like, and he's like, don't stress. I'm just going to detonate them around the world in an equitable way, so that everybody has to reset, and nature can take course, and things like reestablish themselves in a nice, normal, natural way.
Yeah.
And as opposed to presumably like the people that are in charge keeping the other people down or whatever, which is certainly the case. And yeah, I don't know if nuclear warheads are the best way of going about it, but at this point, it seems the most likely way that it's going to be gone about.
It seems more and more probable. But my thing is, you mentioned Jordan Peterson earlier. He talked about the Matthew principle and the concept called Pareto distribution, which says something like the more you have, the more you will get, and the less you have, the less you'll get. And that's sort of an economic principle, I think, as well as perhaps a societal one, where like if you take all the resources away, the people that know how to make money will, like the true capitalists, will make a profit off of the people, and the people who don't know how to handle the money because they're drug addicts or because they're like addicted to gambling or whatever, all of that money is going to go right back into either the same hands or similar hands, from what I can tell.
Yeah. I'm a little biased because recently I purchased a large amount of Cypress flooring, and the guy turned out to be a gambling addict, and he stiffed me on my last 30 fucking square feet that I need to finish my Gnostic Mass Temple, my heretical Gnostic Mass Temple that I'm building. And so I don't know, but a funny thing is like there's this idea of like what's government supposed to do? Oh, you know, it's like they provide for the people or they wage war or whatever. And it's like I think, you know, and maybe this is going to sound like Tucker Carlson, but it's like at the most basic level, they protect people and the interests of people from overpowering malevolent influences. And this could be foreign powers, in which case war. You can declare war, or you cannot declare war and just fucking missile to strike people anyway, apparently. Or you can, or in the case of the government itself, people can, well, they'll of course recognize that the government is against their interests, and because like the cost of a ribeye has tripled in the past 5 years, and they'll vote accordingly, you know. And I don't like a fancy ribeye, right? I just like a ribeye, and it's like, damn, where have all the cheap ribeyes gone? You know, they can't get a best ribeye anymore. Gotta go to fucking Whole Foods and spend fucking $30 for a good ribeye. Or powers domestic, like whatever malicious capitalistic enterprises that exist within our own country. They'll be able to say, nah, you can't do that. And there's you know, it's like the libertarians say like, you know, the Constitution lets people do whatever they want. And it's like, what about the fucking antitrust shit in the Constitution that gives the government the authority to dismantle exploitative monopolies?
Right.
Well,
exactly.
And so it's like, you know, like in the most basic way, like the government's there to protect the people from malevolent entities that are approaching or at a power level that's beyond Super Saiyan, where you are fucked and you're like in no way are you in a position to upend that. So whatever.
Well, was there anything else, a closing statement perhaps that you wanted to offer the people listening?
Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law.
Love is the law, love under will, right?
Good to talk to you, buddy. Take it easy.
Have a good one.